I get one at home.
Okay,
We're on the air and ready.
cool.
Turn this damn thing off. Never can figure this out. Okay.
This conference will now be recorded.
If it rains, it rains out of it. I don't care. You guys ready? Ready? Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to welcome everyone this evening to January 18th council meeting. Please stand and join me in pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag with the will.
Wait a second. Time
I forgot to put it back. Let me go grab it.
Time out.
Somebody mentioned that to me last.
Trial run.
We're missing something.
Compensate, we didn't pay our rent. There it is. Where did that
See
video
what
go?
happens when you have to take pictures of updated council members?
Oh, it's okay. That's the only mistake you make.
There
You're
we
doing good. Okay, let's start this again. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bellinger?
Here.
Councilmember Swift?
Here?
Councilmember Hagan?
Councilmember Hagan called in earlier. He's not able to attend the meeting, so we'll mark him down absent excused.
Councilmember Crumick?
Here.
And Mayor Ops?
Here. All right. This evening, we're going to take a little deviation from our agenda. We're going to have, this evening we have a guest in our audience. We'd like him to present himself and a little talk. He is, Tom Patty is the county supervisor's chairman. Mr. Patty, would you please come to the podium?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members and everybody that's here in the audience, and anybody in public. I just want to quickly introduce myself. I just recently finished being chairman of the board, and I wanted to share an amazing accomplishment that we got. I was serving the Urban County Coalition, and that's the 16 largest counties in the state of California, representing 80% of the population, by the way. And I was proud to be that representative. And we have meetings once a month, and we talk about multiple things that might be going on up and down throughout our county. And it struck me that we have this drought going on. And as you know, you see by your great city logo that you guys are the gateway to the Sierras, and water is highly important. We have this massive drought in the state of California. Well, I'm proud to say for the first time in California's history that anybody can recall, we put together a water accord promoting water storage, clean water especially for our inner cities, so we have healthy drinking water, but more importantly, that investment for water storage in all capacities. It's really low-hanging fruit, but it's the first time that we have Northern and Southern California working together all the way down to San Diego on a state water plan. We plan on bringing that to all 58 counties through CSAC and getting this promoted statewide and through our legislation. So it was kind of a proud moment. We ratified it last week, and then I'm no longer on UCC, so it was just a great accomplishment in this past year. Also had the distinct honor as a board supervisor. We did redistricting, and as you're well aware, and you now have a new supervisor, Robert Rickman, that's serving Ripon. He and I work very close hand in hand. In fact, we passed, and doesn't relate too much here, but we passed measurable funding action for the homeless. And as you know, we're all one big county, so what's happening in one area also affects another. But another thing that we've talked about a couple times is I'll be talking to our airport director, but we want quality of life. So that airport route, as we're looking for increasing traffic in and around and through this region and to the Stockton airport, I want to make certain that you know that we're paying attention to that issue as it relates to citizens, clean air, and the quality of life that we have. So I know you have an agenda. You're getting caught up, first one of the year. I certainly don't want to take too much time, but my office is always available as one of the elected representatives. And again, working with Robert Rickman hand in hand, we're great partners. You're going to have a fantastic county supervisor in Bob Rickman, and I look forward to working with him and regionally of what's going on in our area, in our county. First and foremost, through redistricting, we're going to have a single congressional member that's going to represent all of San Joaquin County. We've got the 5 supervisors, and we now have 2 state assembly members as well as the senator. So I think that we did a great job. It was a responsibility. We took it very serious, and I'm proud of the accomplishments that I have as one of the board members and one of the ones that work for you. So if you ever need us, we work at your behalf. Sometimes we're not out here too often, but you're definitely on the radar. I travel through this region, going up and traveling into the mountains and fishing and enjoying the Stanislaus River and this beautiful water and the quality of life that we have. So I appreciate all of you, your service to the community, and this opportunity to come before you this evening just to say a couple words, especially about that water storage and plans that we have here in our region.
Tom, would you entertain a couple questions?
I certainly will.
Council, is there anyone here that'd like to ask Mr. Patty any questions?
I'm
You're
good.
good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, well, the question I have, you already answered. I want to just thank you for being here, showing some interest in our community. It's always nice to see somebody come up here and actually identify themselves, so we know who we do have an opportunity to speak with. Thank you very much, and congratulations.
I thank all of you.
Good luck on your future endeavor.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Patty's done. Let's move into our agenda this evening, and I think the first item this evening is going to be a presentation, letter of accommodation, Officer Sharp and Officer Halverson, something like that. Here we go. Sorry, buddy. Anyway, Chief, it's all yours.
Thank you. Council, I want to make sure you're aware of something that was going on, that two of our own Escalon officers took it upon themselves, got creative, really creative, took a huge amount of initiative and creativity, and put together a plan to react to something. Law enforcement, we're usually reactive. If you're lucky, you get a last-minute opportunity to plan for something. Most cases, it's go and figure it out when you get there. They had minimal amount of time. They utilized the minimal resources that they had at hand, and they managed to cover all three of our schools that were facing possible threat. But Escalon Police Department takes any threat towards our schools, our community, very seriously, and we'll look into every one of them accordingly, and we'll respond. The threat that presented itself started months ago with social media, TikTok challenges. I believe it started with tear up your school bathroom or something. We are not immune. Talked to school staff, and there was damages to bathrooms, etc. And it spread across the nation. The last one that popped up was, I don't want to use the term, but an act of violence so extreme that it would bring basically school shooting. So when that spread, the whole nation was in a panic. Not really outward panic, but enough to be overly concerned. These two officers were on duty the day it was supposed to happen. It started to receive calls, concerned parents, school staff, that did we have a plan? Well, we didn't have a plan, but they put it together very quickly and executed it all by themselves with minimal supervision, if any. I believe Sergeant wasn't on duty yet. So both for their quick thinking, planning, and how they took this on themselves with the concern for the public and the protection they provided for our schools, Escalon schools. I gave them both letters of commendation, and I'd like to publicly recognize them now. If I could have both of them come up to the podium. So of course, I brought them into my office to give them the letters of commendation. And I think Sharp's comment was, "Oh, Chief, it's just what we get paid to do." Talking about two most humble officers we have. Quick thinking, bright, with a long future. And I hope you accept these challenge coins. I'd like to thank you for a job well done.
Thank you, Chief. I do. Good evening, everyone. Oh, I guess that's what my voice sounds like out loud, kind of different. As much as I'm moved, and I know Officer Sharp is moved as well, to be publicly recognized, ultimately this is it's a group effort, it's a team effort. Guys and gals we were working with, we have a couple of different group texts and whatnot, and they were saying, hey, my bag's packed, it's by the back door, I'm ready. Make sure dispatch calls us. So, I mean, Chief said it well. It's reactionary. It's okay. What resources do we have right now, and how are we going to make this work? Ultimately, the rest of the team needs to get recognized. So for everyone that was ready to go, Call of Duty, I mean, people that should be asleep because they need to come back in a matter of hours after working a stressful night, I think if we could all give them, the rest of the Escalon Police Department, a round of applause. So. I don't really have much to say, just we thank you guys. We love this community, my family, my partners, working with the chief and the council. Thank you guys for everything. So, and yeah, sorry for the little one for screaming and everything.
All right.
Mayor, one extra thing to add to this, not to take away anything from them, but Sergeant Flores informed me today of some loose numbers when it comes to DUI. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers usually hosts an award. Last year, I think because of COVID, we didn't see anything. I didn't get any response. No emails were sent to me. Sergeant Flores put together some loose numbers, or had an officer put them together, and looks like right around 30 DUIs were handed out for the year of 2021. Everyone in that department, in this department, pretty much every one of those officers had at least 1 or 2 DUIs, but leading the pack was Officer Geck with 11 of them. Now I know he kind of beat out one on a little proxy, but tonight, if Officer Baldonado will stand up, that officer right there handed out 10 legitimate DUIs and deserves a MAD award if we can get a hold of him.
Most definitely. Thank you.
It's those officers and that kind of reaction that you have throughout this department that make me proud, honored, and blessed to be the chief of police for this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for your service. All right. We'll move down here to the consent calendar. These items are considered routine in nature and are acted upon by single action unless requested by an individual council member or member of the public for special consideration.
Yep, Mayor Ells, regarding item number 3, I will be abstaining from voting on check number 9832.
Okay.
And thank you, Mayor. I would like to pull item 4 to be continued or replaced onto a future meeting.
Very
So I'd
good.
like to remove that item.
Okay.
And we also have some updates on item 5. Item 5 is the contract with Gelatin Solid Waste. And we actually have an updated Exhibit B. So page 91 of
2000.
Page 91 of the agenda, yes, or something. This is what it will be replaced with, which is our residential bulky item collection program. They had actually made some updates and had their logo put on it and stuff, and so that's actually in replacement of what is in the agenda. And as well as legal counsel, our city attorney, Mark Velasquez, wanted me to point out that there was an error in the staff report. The second item from the bottom, where it starts after 10 years of the term of the effective date, if you go halfway down the paragraph, it says that the agreement was amended to specify that if Gelatin fails to construct a high diversion organic waste processing facility within 2 years or a date specified by the California Department of Resources Recycling and Recovery, otherwise known as Cal Recycle, whichever is earlier, that Gelatin will refund the portion of the rate increases attributable to construction costs and will be refunded to customers. Was since updated in the actual contract agreement. So the contract agreement specifies that it would not be a refund, but a reduction in fees moving forward.
Interesting. That's in a 2-year period.
Yes, in that 2 year.
And that period starts when?
With approval of the contract.
Okay, so this time, 2 years from now, if Mr. Gelatin has the misfortune of not completing his project, we will get reduced fees based on the money we've paid him.
Reduced fees moving forward, correct.
And what percentage of those fees will be returned to us at what time span? $1 a year for 2 years? Oh, it's worked out at that time.
Yes, yeah. So we didn't put those calculations together, so we would have to work that out at that time and then move forward with that.
Do we have any calculation what that amount of money would be?
I don't offhand.
And Mr.
Oh.
Council members, this is City Attorney Mark Velasquez. Let's just pull it from the consent and add it to the regular agenda item so we could just
That
have
works.
further discussion on it.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so do we have a motion?
I move to approve the consent calendar as stated.
Okay, do we have a second on the motion?
Second?
We have a motion and a second for the motions. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. And how do we report the missing council member? Just as a 4-0?
Absolute excuse, so yeah, 4-0.
Okay, very good. Very good.
And we've indicated at roll call that he's absent, so that'll be recorded in the minutes.
Okay, very good. All right, staff communications.
So before you, we have the last 2 months of reporting for November and December. The treasurer's report for December is not complete, so we will have that on our next meeting, which is currently February 7th. And so we've got the police department activity reports for November and December, animal control, recreation department, development services reports, building department reports, public works department reports, water department reports, and wastewater treatment plant reports, all for November and December. And if you have any questions.
Gentlemen, are there any questions for the staff?
I've got a few.
Go ahead.
Chief's not here, so I'll wait for him to come back.
All right.
On his, status of the NG solar project, are we complete with that now? Or next to complete?
We're very close to.
I can give an update on that.
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, we are complete with solar. We've had some hiccups with materials, obviously, for some of the meters. So we're hoping here within the next couple of weeks, into January, 1st of February, we'll be wrapped up with meters, and then we will be done with NG. We would have been done by end of year, but due to materials, things are just kind of slowing us down a bit. But things have been going well. NG's keeping us posted, and they're staying on top of it as best as they can.
Thank you, Justin. And just to go along with that, looking at the check register, look between MID and PG&E for December, we were in a little over $42,000 range. September, I went back to look, and it's a little over 82 grand, almost 83. So I'm assuming we can continue to see that cost savings moving forward, give or take, in that range. Okay,
Yes, sir, that is correct.
awesome. And I'll wait for the chief to come back. I got a couple questions for him, but I can wait on that.
Okay, any other questions? None. Okay, so the question, can we vote and then you can ask them maybe later?
Yeah,
We can ask
There's
them at
nothing
the
to
end of the
vote on.
meeting.
There's nothing to vote on this side, on.
It's just
on
a roll.
communication.
it's just
Done.
communication.
All right, now we have matters presented from the audience. Back up on this here, we didn't have to ask for public input on this one, we just went through. Consent calendar?
They can go.
That's correct, Mayor. That was just staff communications.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, matters presented from the audience. The public may address the city council on any item that is on the agenda at the time the item is called. The public may also address the city council on any item not on the agenda that is within the authority of the city council. Each speaker is limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. Unused time may not be yielded to another speaker. The determination of whether an item is within the authority of the city council is discretionary decision made by the mayor. All right. If you have something you'd like to speak this evening, come to the podium, give us your name, and you have 5 minutes to discuss it with us. Okay, stampede's over. All right, is there anyone online that would like to speak on anything? Okay, we've asked the two bodies, back to council, gentlemen. Anything want to be added before we move on? We're good. Administrative matters, considering the request from Roxanne Schatz, property owner of 350 Yosemite Avenue, to remove said property from Liberty Business Park specific plan, continued from November 1, 2021 meeting. Staff.
If I may, Mayor, this is City Attorney Mark Velasquez. I think at this point, now we address the matter that was pulled from the consent calendar. Discuss it now.
We're down, say again?
Go back up to here.
Oh, I thought
We had pulled that one since there were
we
questions on
pulled the
it.
other one, okay.
And so we'll go ahead and move forward with that. So I'll go ahead, for that item that was on consent that we've moved into administrative matters, it was adopting resolution XX-22, which is approving the amended solid waste franchise agreement with Jilton Solid Waste Management for solid waste services. So at the November 15th council meeting, council conducted the Prop 218 proceedings and held a public hearing on solid weight increases requested by Jilton Solid Waste. These rate increases included the costs associated with implementing the SB 1383 requirements effective January 1st, 2022, as well as a 2.5% consumer price index adjustment. The City Council then adopted Resolution 38-21, which approved an updated rate schedule effective January 1st, 2022, conditioned upon the approval of an amended franchise agreement. The major amendments to the franchise agreement are as follows. The agreement was amended to expire 5 years from the effective date. However, on the anniversary of the effective date, an additional year will be added to the term, so it remains at 5 years. If the city issues a notice to terminate the agreement shall be terminated 4 years from the next anniversary of the effective date. After 10 years of the term from the effective date, the city can terminate the agreement 2 years from the next anniversary of the effective date instead of the 4 years. The recently approved solid waste rate increases included capital costs to construct a high diversion organic waste processing facility to comply with SB 1383 regulations. A completion date for construction has not been set. The agreement was amended to specify that if Jilton fails to construct this waste processing facility within 2 years or a date specified by Cal Recycle, whichever is earlier, that a reduction in fees would move forward on that portion of the rate increases attributed to the construction costs. So it would be the reduction of fees as Mark indicated. That was an error in the staff report. And then another item that was added was the performance bond, added in the amount of $100,000. And then a section regarding administrative charges, penalties, and liquidated damages was added. The other amendments applied to the franchise agreement are related to requirements of SB 1383, which include the definitions, two container system processes for residential and 1 container processes for commercial, container labeling, educational support, contamination monitoring, inspections and enforcement, compliance reviews and processes. Jilton staff and city staff and legal counsel work together to address these specific requirements, utilizing a model franchise agreement that was provided by Cal Recycle, as well as a model franchise agreement that was utilized by BB&K, which is our legal firm, which incorporated further updates to ensure overall compliance with the state's regulations. So fiscal impact, the approval of this contract has no fiscal impact, as all revenues and expenditures were previously anticipated in our fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. So if you have any questions regarding this item or in the contract amendment, and as I indicated earlier, we have that replacement of Exhibit B.
So we didn't pull it.
We did pull it.
We did pull it.
Because you were asking questions.
Right.
We went ahead and pulled it so that if anybody else has questions, we can answer those as well.
Yeah.
So it has been pulled from consent, added to an item for discussion.
Okay, so we're at discussion now?
Correct.
Okay, so I guess we go back to what I said earlier. So at what point were all the dynamics going to be figured out in terms of what the payment schedule will be back to us. Does that affect the city's money as well when they're getting their percentage of it? Do they have to return it to the taxpayers?
That is a, go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry, yeah. Hi, I think what we're talking, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor, are we talking about just the specific change in case the MRF was not built, the high diversion facility?
But the
Is that what you're
dynamics of that
referring to?
change are what we're discussing, and I was interested in knowing what actually transpired if this thing did come through and he didn't perform.
Correct. So everything's been worked out. The point that was negotiated and changed was the fact if the facility didn't actually get built. So there's a 2-year period for Gelatin to complete their high efficiency diversion facility. And if it does not get complete, well, the fees that everyone's paying goes back to the original fees before we did the Prop 218. In other words, the public should not be paying a higher rate for something that wasn't built or completed.
But the money that
So,
the money that's being collected would be returned as well.
No, that was part of negotiations, and that was essentially, there is a benefit being conferred during the first 2 years while it's being constructed. And Gelatin is in other ways trying to meet the requirements, the diversion requirements during the first 2 years. So there wouldn't be a refund, but going forward, if it's not built, then the fees go back, which actually there's a benefit in the future then by the highly reduced, what would be considered highly reduced fees at that point.
Well,
That don't make a whole lot of sense to me personally. I'm a little confused here. What you're saying is, if this operation doesn't take place in 2 years, the money that's been collected will not be returned, and we'll get benefits by a reduced fee. Well, is that reduced fee back to what it was before the 1383 came on board? Or is that a reduced fee even below that? So if it's just going back to where it was before, would we gain anything?
We're gaining that the company actually gets to build their facility and meet the requirements while they're building that facility.
I understand that. What I'm confused again is that we said if he doesn't complete, and I was asking if it didn't happen, what the consequences were, and I'm still not getting an accurate answer. The answer I'm looking for is what becomes of the money that was collected for this endeavor if this project is not completed? And I was told initially it'd be returned through fees, then I was told it wouldn't be returned. So my question is, what actually happens to the money that's been paid if the system doesn't get built?
Mark, do you want me to add in?
Please.
So from a financial perspective, what would happen is basically the contract, and I'm going to use terms, Mark, you can correct me, would default. You'd have to renegotiate that part. Obviously, by state mandate, you'd still have to do that diversion. So they'd have to come up with some other way to do it. In that evaluation, they'd have to reevaluate fees. So the fees would, the dynamics change, so the fees have to change. Do they become the same as what they were before? I don't know, because it depends on where they are in that process. Does it become less? I don't know, because it depends on where they are in that process. But either way, the fees are impacted by us having to basically restart the process of this contract because they didn't comply. Does that make sense?
It does in a way, but what I don't understand is if all this goes sideways, which I don't see it happen personally, but let's say it does, what you're telling us is that there's been no determination in terms of what's going to happen at that point, at this point.
We wouldn't know yet, because say the facility was 80% complete,
Okay,
and it came back to council, and council said, fine, we're going to give you more time, but we don't want to give you, we don't want our citizens to be burdened with that increase. We're going to delay that increase because this is not complete, right? So or they could come back and say, no, we want the reduced rate, we're going to go someplace else, or we want a different diversion facility. We don't know what the answer is at the point that 2 years is up. Does that make sense?
well, I understand what you're trying to tell me, and I won't push anymore because I think you've got what you got.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay, gentlemen, anybody else?
yeah, question, refresh my memory. What year do we have to go to 75% pulling organic solid waste stream? Is that January 1, 24 or January 1, 25? Okay. So it gives you a year leeway between, when this facility needs to be built, because frankly, if we don't get this thing built, we probably got bigger problems than that. Is there any provision, though, number one, based on your timetables, is this a reasonable assumption that it will be built in 2 years? Assuming you can get all your materials in on time. Justin just talked about delays in our project.
Hope it's not on a ship in the bay.
Well,
I can't say, what's gonna happen tomorrow, because we all know transportation is
Right.
difficult, getting equipment, parts. We're 18 months out right now on trucks that were supposed to be delivered, in the beginning of.
that's where I'm getting at.
That was ordered in 2019. So, we're trying to be, okay, we can still do this. We feel that we're gonna be able to accomplish our goals that we've set out with, if we've got a makeshift stuff, and I don't wanna say okey rig, but,
Plan B.
whatever that word might be.
Yeah.
To get it done, because we understand if we don't get it done, we all have problems.
Right.
So one way or another, we're gonna get it done, and there's gonna be money spent, and, all the things to go out and get the money from the lending institutions and all that. So there's gonna be stuff done. So at the end of the day, I feel very confident, no matter what's gonna happen, Jilton's gonna stick to what they've worked out with the city of Escalon.
Okay.
And hopefully, we're not standing up here 2 years from now and we're not there, but I guarantee you, I will be able to show you progress, that things are being done.
Yeah.
And that other 25%, we may have, I don't have the solution entirely yet until we get some of this done, if that's even possible.
Well, I think that's my issue. I don't think you guys would be the only ones in the same boat. I say you guys, all of us will be in the same boat. If you have supply chain issues that prohibit the manufacturing of the facilities that are going to get us to that percentage, I would hope that the state would be somewhat realistic about it.
Right, but right now, we're confident that it's gonna come together.
Okay.
We've been working on it for a year already, and so we feel good.
Thank you, Mr. Jilton.
And they are very good about keeping the city in the loop. We have a very good partnership with Gelatin, so our staff is constantly in contact with them regarding stuff, especially with SB 1383 moving forward.
Any other questions?
I've got the disaster question, the one that's way out there that I don't think will happen, but I'm gonna ask. So we're looking 3 years from now where it's required that we have this diversion plan in place. It doesn't happen for whatever reason, I don't think it will, but in case it does, we start getting fines from the state for not having that situation. Who pays for that? Is that something on your part that's part of this contract agreement, that if you don't get that facility built to the specs the state wants, and we don't have a place to put our garbage to meet the spec they require, as a city, we're gonna start incurring fees for that. So who's on the hook for that? Because we're putting a lot of reliance on Gelatin, which I have more than 99% confidence you're gonna get there, but if it doesn't, where does that land for us in the city and our constituents here?
Mark, can you answer that one? Because I don't have that memorized like you do. I know there's
Right, I'm
something
trying
in
to
there.
search. I don't have it memorized either. That's why I'm searching for the
I am
section
as
that
well,
addresses
yes.
this. It
I
is
know there's
addressed
something
in
there,
there.
but you remember
We
what-
have an indemnity provision. Gelatin is on the hook to meet essentially the goals, whether they get this facility built or not. Their plan is to have the facility to help them reach that goal. If they don't, then our fees get reduced back to this recent, essentially what we're paying right now, not next month when they go into effect. But Gelatin still has to pay. The short answer is, we're both gonna be on the hook. Because
Okay.
the state, if they start fining, are gonna fine us, and then we're gonna go back and look at point to some of these indemnity provisions and see how far Gelatin actually met their obligations. And based on that, at that time, we'll know whether.
Okay, as long as it's in the works and somebody's thought about it, discussed it, I'm fine. Smarter minds there between you and everybody else, Mark, I appreciate that.
And the key thing for maybe a little comfort for you folks on the council, is it's going to be a lot on showing progress, showing that we are following, staff is, submitting the reports that they have, we're submitting the reports we're supposed to. They're going to have a lot of other places to go mess with if we're not being a bad student. If we're taking care of business, I don't think we're going to get dinged, but if we're not taking care, then we're all going to be in trouble.
Okay.
And we're not going to want to be one of those clients.
My time in the council, I've never seen the state come after anybody that's working in the right direction. That's the key. As long as you're showing progress, things happen, costs go up, world turns around, but as long as you're showing good effort, they leave you alone. If you show defiance, that's a whole different ballgame. Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, we're gonna move on.
Okay.
Now,
I'd like to move that we adopt the resolution. We need to make a motion to adopt.
there you go. Let's have that motion.
Yeah, I'd like to move to adopt resolution number XX-22, approving the amended solid waste franchise agreement with Gelatin Solid Waste Management, Inc. for solid waste services.
Okay, is there a second?
I'd second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Mr. Mayor. Too late.
You wanted me to
I
have
was
the
just going to
public input.
suggest. Yeah, exactly.
Imagine that. Okay. All right, well, we'll get them the next time. All right. Let's move on to where we are now, down administrative matters again.
Yes.
All right, very good. Here we go. Consideration.
And a way to cure that, Mr. Mayor, the way to cure that is to ask the public now if they have any comments on that. And if there is, we can do a revote. And that's the way
Very
to
good,
fix
Mark.
it.
We'll do that for you. All right, is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on the last item? If so, please come to the podium and have your 5 minutes. If not, we're going to ask those on the internet. Anyone on the internet would be interested in commenting? Just as I suspected. All right, Mark, we done it. All right, moving on to administrative matters. Consideration. Consider a request from Roxanne Schatz, property owner, 350 Yosemite Avenue, to remove said property from the Liberty Business Park specific plan. Continued from November 1st, 2021 meeting. Staff,
Thank you, Mayor.
you're welcome.
On October 18, 2021, a majority of the city council approved a request by property owner Roxana Schatz to add to a future council agenda a discussion on the removal of 350 Yosemite Avenue from the Liberty Business Park specific plan. In September of 1998, the then property owners of what makes up the specific plan area applied for annexation to the city of Escalon for purpose of establishing an industrial area that could be developed for those purposes. LAFCO granted final approval on this annexation on May 19th of 2003. On June 6, 2005, the City Council adopted a comprehensive update to the general plan, which designated a substantial area in the northwest portion of the community for industrial and commercial uses. The adopted general plan calls for the preparation of a specific plan for the industrial and commercial area located at the northeast corner of Brennan Avenue and State Route 120. Several meetings were held with property owners and interested persons to discuss possible development scenarios, and a preliminary conceptual plan was designed. As the formal plan was being drafted, work began on the environmental review process. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on August 14, 2007 on the final EIR and the specific plan, and recommended that the City Council certify the final EIR, which is an environmental impact report, and adopt the Liberty Business Park specific plan. The council then conducted their public hearing on November 5th, 2007, and adopted the plan as presented. Below are the key concepts that were reviewed and addressed throughout the process of developing the specific plan. It is staff's current understanding in reviewing files that any development projects and their related studies were halted upon the downturn of the economy. Regarding land use, the specific plan affects 178-acre area bounded by SR 120 and to the south Brennan Avenue, to the west, and BNSF Railroad to the northeast northeast, and the city boundary to the north. The specific plan calls for the following land uses: rail-oriented industrial, 49.4 acres located along Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad right-of-way along the northeasterly portion of the property and expected to be developed with distribution warehousing and trans-shipping facilities. Light industrial, 50 acres located primarily along Brennan Avenue and expected to be developed with a light industrial business park and additional standalone uses. Commercial, 39 acres located along SR 120 and expected to be developed with retail uses primarily intended to serve the traveling public on the highway. Office, 25.1 acres located along SR 120 and in the interior of the property and expected to be developed with corporate and professional offices. And then 14.9 acres of open space located in the interior of the property and at the intersection of SR 120 and the BNSF Railroad and expected to be developed with landscape parks, stormwater detention basins. Circulation. The circulation element of the general plan shows Brennan Avenue as an arterial, SR 120 as a major arterial, and a collector and a minor collector through the site to provide internal circulation and connections to Brennan Avenue and SR 120. These street facilities have been incorporated into the design of the specific plan. Brennan Avenue would be developed as a 4-lane facility as development occurs. The minor collector will be a 2-lane street, and the major collector would transition from 4 lanes through the commercial portion of the project to 2 lanes through the industrial portion. SR 120 would be widened to a 4-lane facility early in the project development with the potential to widen to 6 lanes near build-out if the greatest anticipated traffic increases occur. Development policies. The Liberty Business Park specific plan includes a number of policies and design and development standards intended to ensure that this area builds out in a manner that meets the goals of the city of Escalon. Some of the key requirements include the following: monument signs along SR 120 at Brennan Avenue and the BNSF Railroad, gateway entrances from SR 120 to both collectors, architectural variety and interest, additional landscaping near buildings and open spaces, varied buildings setbacks related to scales of the buildings, buffers between industrial and other land uses. The utilities plan for Liberty Business Park specific plan is consistent with the city's sewer, water, and storm drain master plans, which were also adopted in 2007, and extends services throughout the development. For efficiency in construction and ease of operation, the specific plan shows a unified system serving all sections of the specific plan area and providing appropriate connections to adjacent properties and to the master plan facilities. As the site was expected to develop over the course of many years, the establishment of a backbone design is essential to ensure that each section is built in consideration of the overall needs of the project. Financing. The specific plan for Liberty Business Park was intended to be self-supporting, with each phase of development funding both the community infrastructure and the shared project infrastructure necessary to serve the site. Each individual development project would be subject to the streets, sewer, water, and storm drain impact fees adopted by the council. In addition, each project would have the responsibility for constructing or funding the construction of a portion of the shared project infrastructure. The method of calculating the financial responsibility varies for each type of facility as follows. Streets. The project was expected at that time to generate a total of 33,133 average daily trips upon full build-out, which was 2007. The impact of these trips on nearby streets and intersections was evaluated, and a proportionate share of the cost of anticipated improvements was allocated to the project. The anticipated trip generation of each new development in Liberty Business Park would be calculated as a portion of the total anticipated trips, and a fee would be calculated based on those trips. At various stages of its development, construction of street improvements would be required in lieu of payment of fees, and in some cases, payback arrangements may be necessary to allow later projects to reimburse earlier developers for the expense of shared improvements. Sewer. The sewer system was divided into several independent systems serving distinct areas of the site. Development in each of those areas would be expected to construct or fund the construction of the lines which serve the area. Payback agreements would be instituted, and fees would be collected on the basis of typical demand for the type of land use proposed to ensure that each user was responsible for a proportionate share of the total cost of the system. Water. Due to the need to provide looped systems at each stage of development and the variety of possible construction scenarios which may occur, it was not possible to assign responsibility for construction of portions of the water system to separate areas of the project site. For that reason, the specific plan calls for each development to construct that portion of the system necessary to serve its individual needs. Payback arrangements would be instituted and fees would be collected on a per acre basis to ensure that each user is responsible for a proportionate share of the total cost of the system. All of the shared stormwater improvements are shown in the Stormwater Master Plan and were included in the community-wide impact fee analysis, which also was approved in 2007. So we know this is a lot of information from a project that was approved several years ago. It is still in effect, and obviously hasn't moved forward for a number of reasons. And so we did put in a section regarding the concerns of staff. So the request to remove 350 Yosemite Avenue from the specific plan may impact the plan as a whole and requires an extensive process in order to do so. This process requires opening the plan to the public, where it is anticipated that additional revisions and/or potential concerns of the public and affected property owners would then be discussed. As the specific plan was a part of the adopted general plan for the city, the general plan may also need to be amended to reflect any changes in the specific plan. Opening the general plan will also require the city to make other additional updates to the document. General plan updates would necessitate the hiring of an outside consulting firm to make those revisions. As noted above, the specific plan utility infrastructure was calculated in the sewer, water, and storm drain master plans. Changes to the specific plan will also affect these documents. Changes to these utility master plans will also require the hiring of consultants to perform that work. Ultimately, the changes to the plan would likely lead to the city to take other actions and/or needing to conduct additional processes to address the changes. There also continues to be no utilities and/or infrastructure available to that specific plan area. This means that if the city is open to 350 Yosemite Avenue being removed from the plan, they would still be unable to develop the property due to the lack of utility infrastructure. The city's standards require connection to both sewer and water systems when developing property. Deviations from these standards may require additional policies and procedures to be reviewed and adopted by the city, or the negotiation between a developer and the city for the creation of a development agreement, which may take several months to process and finalize. If the city chooses one of these options, further research would be needed to be conducted and provide additional information and processes on these items. Regarding the process, the Government Code, Section 65353 and 65355, addresses the adoption, amendment, and repeal of a specific plan. All of these actions require a notice public hearing before both the Planning Commission and City Council. So anticipated timing for amendments or repealing of a specific plan is estimated at 12 to 18 months. We did attach the original agenda item request. That was back from October of last year. And then we also included the Liberty Business Park specific plan, which is approved back in 2007. It's a very large document. There's a lot of information in there. We also have the property owner, Roxana Schatz, in the audience if you have any questions or need any additional information.
Roxana Schatz, 1700 Riesling Way, Escalon. And I'm here tonight to discuss either the removal from Liberty Business Park or some revisions in the land use zoning requirements. Right now, if you looked at the table 3.2, that's the current land use and zoning under the LBP Park. I'm limited to administrative, business, professional, medical, and dental. And it says or similar use, but it's not outlined what the similar use is. And then the only other thing is retail stores, art supplies, glassware, drugstore, delicatessen, produce, hardware, and variety store. So if you look at the C2 under the Liberty Business Park, there's only 2 items that I'm permitted to do, two categories. If you look at the old C2, what I was allowed to do was, let me see here. I was permitted to do, retail sales. Even though it says retail sales, it's not specific in here, and it's actually alcoholic beverages, off-premises, alcoholic beverages for restaurants, supermarket or grocery store, I was allowed to do carpet, furniture cleaning, laundromat, launder drying and dry cleaning, temporary structures for course of construction, photography studio, and it goes on and on. Plant nurseries, I already lost a buyer because they wanted to set up a nursery there. Car wash was a conditional use. Motor vehicle sales was a conditional use. Service station was permitted, and what I see here is no longer permitted. Breweries, brew pubs, tasting rooms, these were all conditional permits. And if you look at, right now, I have no conditional permits. It's what's permitted, that's it. So they've taken all my conditional permits away. So what I would like to do is see something revised with the C2 that's under the Liberty Business Park. If I can't remove it, I can see I might not be alive by the time it gets done. So I would like to do, if possible, some type of revision to the what's permitted out there at Liberty Business Park. When you start looking at 39 acres of commercial, with so much frontage on Highway 120, I mean, how are we going to develop all of that into professional offices, dental, medical, glassware, glass blowing? I mean, times have changed. This was back in 2007. And, I mean, when I start looking at developing that, I mean, we need the sales tax base here too. This is never going to happen that I can see. I've had RV storage out there, someone that had a business and he wanted to do some storage of his equipment and do an RV facility. Kind of went through the council and they agreed that might be well and good out there, but then of course we were in Liberty Business Park, so that shot that pretty much down. So now I find myself going through maybe an 18-month process to remove it and a lot of costs. I'm not sure how this is all going to unfold because George Rose did sell all that many years ago. So it's a, and I don't have his name with me, but it's an almond grower out of Ripon.
It's a what, please?
He's an almond grower. He has several almond orchards, and he developed that all into almonds.
Is that Dave Reese?
No, not Dave. I can't think of the name, and I thought I had it in my packet here, and I didn't.
Do you have
No.
a map we can put up and see the park itself? I'd like to see a map of it, please.
Were you the owner of the property during the development back in, was it '03, I think it was? As far as the
07 or
discussion and
whatever
the development of this plan?
I
Were you
was.
part of that?
I was, but basically I had a buyer for it, and he was working with George Rose, and they were doing all this, so it was my intent to sell it to him, but he died in the process, so not long after that. So that.
With a buyer in mind, you didn't concern yourself too much with the existing C2
We had a
designation for that
contract
property
on it.
then?
We had a contract to purchase the property. And so, you know, he wanted to do specific things out there with George Rose. And of course, like I say, he passed away, so.
Well, do you know anything about the history? It's funny, looking through all the Liberty Business Park papers, you start realizing, wow, this is exactly what people have been talking about, that Escalon's been needing for years and years. And it really looked like it would have been a really great plan,
Oh,
something that
right,
Escalon really wouldn't have needed. Then everybody talks about the frontage, you gotta have retail and all that stuff on the frontage. So it's like, wait, so my question is, what, to staff, anybody, why did we go away from having such a big variety of retail on the frontage, which is exactly the kind of thing that people in town always said we needed here?
Right, we do need retail.
I know, do you know why we went away from that? Why we changed it
I
to
have no clue. And I look and I said, I'm so limited under Liberty Business Park right now. I mean, it'll never develop.
Yeah,
And I don't mind
Just the corner?
keeping it in Liberty
39
Business
acre,
Park
or-
for
Right.
potential
I'm not sure
development for the industrial, especially with the railroad.
It's just
But
13 acres.
what are the odds of that happening now? And this fellow's just a big egg guy that bought it back there and planted it all in
Right.
several orchards. And I don't know if his intent is to ever develop it, but right now I would say that he probably isn't. He's an older gentleman too, so.
I mean, my gut feeling is be hesitant to yank the whole project too, because it's a whole nice succinct project.
Exactly.
So how difficult would it be to look at that zoning in that frontage area and modify it to fit 2022's needs?
So, like it's indicated in the staff report, the specific plan was based off of what we have in our general plan. So in order to update the specific plan, we would also have to go back and update our general plan. Both of those are items that look at our current needs and then also go long-term use. General plan is, your forever document, your guidelines for the entire city. It's something that we would have to hire outside and have an outside consultant do.
But it might,
So that's where the additional cost would come in order to update both the specific plan to make sure that everything is matching and corresponding. You would have to pay somebody to do that. When we had checked into the original developer of this plan, which was Quadnoff, they now go by QK, back in, I can't remember, last year, maybe February, March, when Ms. Schatz had brought somebody who was interested in doing the outdoor storage and equipment storage and such. They had given us a quote of $25,000 just for the specific plan, to be able to go in and amend it accordingly to be able to fit that different use in there. And that includes, as indicated in the staff report, the processes, the going through the entire document to make sure that A attaches to B, attaches to X, Y, Z, that it's consistent throughout the document, as well as the public hearings, taking it to planning commission, presenting the item. Also because the item is older but still in effect, you typically want to educate both of your council and your planning commission before they move forward on it. And so we're going back into a document and having to review it first to make sure everybody understands what it's for, what its intent is, why we're moving forward with it, and then why we're making certain amendments to make sure they're fully understood before adopting them. And so that's where the 12 to 18 months comes in. But there's also a price tag with that as well, because that is a long-term project that would take a lot of time of staff. We would need to hire somebody else to help us with that.
no, and I get that. I'm just
Yeah,
wondering what
so-
my
But
gut feeling.
they're all attached to each other, and so
Sure.
that's the hiccup. The specific plan is
That-
attached to the general
that's-
plan, which is attached to our zoning, and so it affects everything.
Even if we just work on the zoning, Roxanne stays in Liberty Business Park, even if we just work on the zoning,
Right.
there's and I'm wondering if that still, however, is a path of least resistance versus pulling her out, changing the whole thing, killing the plan. I'm still wondering, relatively speaking, to make something happen there, if changing the zoning is the lesser of two evils.
If we did modify the zoning only, we would still have to go back to the general plan
Understood.
and amend the
Understood.
zoning in the general plan, as well as amending our zoning in, let's see, we've got our general plan, and then specific plan. So we would still have to open up those documents.
Understood. Yeah, I just don't know if anything's ever gonna happen there
Yeah.
any other way.
So we
you
did
know.
have that opportunity a few months ago where that magazine, that site
Mm-hmm.
selection magazine had contacted us. And because this area had come up for discussion, we brought it to council asking,
Mm-hmm.
if we wanted to pay to have that area advertised. That site selection magazine, it it is, attached and reaches out to people or developers and businesses and people that have that type of money that would be able to do development projects such as these. And I think ultimately, when I go back on the file and read through how this was done, I mean, I get the impression in reading through notes and such that time, that's what the city was looking for, was that one person that would be able to fund the whole project per se, but maybe in phases because we like slow growth.
Sure,
So creating some type of project with multiple phases, and whoever was gonna do it, would be working out the details, and they would just follow along those phases. And so that's what that magazine.
One thing here, you said slow growth. Slow growth, in my opinion, is not referenced commercial and industrial. We never, ever, I think as a group, ever suggested that was an idea. The idea of a slow growth was always relating to the residential impact. We didn't want to grow residentially to the point that we lost control of our community.
Yeah.
But never did we ever think, I've never heard anyone ever say, let's not do more commercial or industrial. That was never heard, I've never heard that.
Well, I mean, right here in this picture, it's showing how we had already intended on it being phased. And so typically when you phase things like that, you're trying to address them in an appropriate amount of time to make sure we're, dotting our I's, crossing our T's. And so
I think it was
maybe
phased.
it could have been quicker depending on how fast the company goes. But I think there was that flexibility where we know that this whole project wasn't going to be built out
Right, and it wasn't,
altogether.
it wasn't because we didn't.
Slower than
It's slow because of finances.
financing.
That was the thing, reason it's slow.
Utilities. Yeah, there's a lot of things.
That's why we phase it, because we don't have the money to bust it out. If we had the money to bust that thing out, I believe this council would have approved it.
Roxanne, I have just a couple questions. So you've got this property that you've had for a long time. It's zoned a specific way. Over the course of the last couple decades, the zoning limitations have changed. So it's limited your ability to market it or develop it. Am I correct in that?
Correct.
Okay. So you're seeking tonight for a decision or direction on taking your property that you own in a different direction, right? Which will give you more ability to either market it or sell it or do something with it. Is that correct?
Correct. I just would like to go back to the original C2 zoning requirements. I mean, what it was allowed to do there.
So you're hoping that instead of the restrictions that have put on you with the certain C2 businesses or things that can go in there, that we would allow Liberty Business Park to fall under the old one, which has more options for you?
Just the C2, which is across the front.
Okay.
There's myself, and then there is Lopez, which he has his property for sale.
Okay.
I think it's 800,000 for 5 acres. And then, of course, then it goes into Nagley's.
Okay, so you're asking for your space, which is the frontage, to have a little bit more flexibility on the zoning. Is that what you're seeking tonight?
Yes, under the original C2 zone.
The original C2, okay, I'm just trying to put it in layman's terms so we can all understand what's going on. Thank you.
Right.
Can I ask a quick question?
This is my daughter.
I'm
You certainly may.
Roxanna Gonzalez, and her daughter.
Born the same day.
What would it take to define similar use to bring back some of those items that were in the original zoning?
It would have to be an amendment of some sort. The use, although defined by the zoning amendment, it's staff's understanding that even if the uses were updated, this property is still not going to be able to develop because there is no infrastructure. And so that's the other issue, is even if we were to address the use side, the infrastructure side still comes into play because there is no city infrastructure on that side of the road. And so you could update the uses, we could go through that process and do it, but then we'd still run into that hiccup where there's no utilities. Roxanna's advised me that there is a well, but there is no septic. And city policies as they currently are is that new development has to connect to services. And so the city themselves, we don't have any policies or processes established that would allow somebody to operate a commercial business off of a well. And we don't have any policies or procedures to allow any any other development to install septic systems because we require people to connect to services.
And Roxana, you're aware of that if this is to develop, it needs to connect to the city water and city septic,
Exactly. However.
or city sewer, excuse me.
However, since it's not there, and it
Right,
hasn't been there.
right.
I mean, definitely, I can't afford to bring it clear across by myself. And then when you look at some of these where it says may be reimbursed or some may be reimbursed, I mean, that's sunset period. What is that? Is it going to be for 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years? I don't know. So that's a real risk I would take. And then I had talked one time about, since I do have a well there, and if I was looking for a nursery, or if I was looking at the RV with conditional permits, that we had talked about an above-ground sewer, because it would be people just storing RVs, or they would have a nursery and be able to use the well. And when the services were available, then to tie in. However, the other dilemma is, how in the world did I ever get annexed without the services? Good question. I mean, I got annexed without services. So now I'm in this real quadrum. The county did not want me. They basically said, no, we don't want you. You're too close to the city there, and you're going to have to go through the city. The city didn't want me. So my hands were tied. I couldn't get approval from the county. I couldn't get approval from the city, and here I am.
Okay.
Still going through this.
There's some challenges too for you to do RV storage because we have a rule that says it has to be paved or asphalted and one paved or concreted. And then it creates a storm drain problem for you as well, since you don't have any systems out there for that.
Well, the storm drain, I wouldn't have a problem doing that because I actually have, and I don't know, it's something I'd have to check on because I do have Caltrans when they put the drainage pond behind me. They had that in the front of my property and I had to get an attorney and I had to go through to get it put in the back. And so that's for the runoff. And then I did dedicate for the Collector Street, which they didn't know, I did dedicate that actually to them too, I guess the city or the Caltrans for that street when it's widened. So I did dedicate that.
Why don't you have a brief aside, what kind of nursery were you looking at, or were they looking
It
at?
was a nursery, a local person, they sold their property here and they had greenhouses and nurseries, and that's what they were thinking about doing there, which was pretty nice, actually, give us.
Know a bit about that industry, that would have been a real nice location.
Yes, and so they thought about that, but then they thought, how am I going to do 13 acres of nursery? And so then they said, well, maybe we could do some mini storage or outdoor storage, where everybody's consensus is the outdoor storage. I had a Chevron, this was quite some time ago, that was interested. And they did a whole site plan that they drew up and everything. And then when we talked to the city about, they just said, yeah, we don't want to do it.
I think, to me personally, I mean, if you look at that, you're driving into town, and of course, we've got the storage places, you go in Oakdale now, and that's the first thing that
Right,
catches your eye.
Mm-hmm.
I'd much rather have people catch an eye of a nicely landscaped place, even if it's a storage place, on the north side of the street, versus the first thing that catches your eye is the south side of the street. There's a situation over there that can be more appealing.
Right,
So
right.
I'm just thinking we're limiting ourselves, and if we're gonna have to take a plunge somewhere, if we're ever gonna get this built, I just think you gotta cast as wide a net out as you possibly could regarding retail and C2, because you don't know what the possibilities might be out there, but boy, I bet you there will be one if we've got a wider net.
Yeah, I think if I understand Mayor Pro Tem Swift correctly, that casting a wide net and opening this up to more C2 possibilities, even if it requires an amendment to the general plan, we have to remember that, our foremost job is to work for the people of Escalon that want to invest and utilize their property the best they see fit, and I don't want to stand in the way of that. So if that's what you're seeking tonight, and I'm understanding Mayor Pro Tem Swift correctly, I think I would be in favor of such a motion.
And keeping this in mind, this is also being sensitive to the staff and how busy they are too. Yes, and I'm fully acknowledging that a lot of this might need to be done on the outside, just because of staffing issues, and I get that.
It would,
Yeah.
and so really it would be the council letting staff know if you would be willing to pay for that expense, or if you want the property owner to pay a portion of that expense. because the last time we had checked into it, and that was just on the specific plan, and it was only one company at that time that responded back to us, which was this one. We did contact, I believe, at least one other, possibly two, and they didn't respond back. Was estimated at $25,000 just for the specific plan. And so if they're going in and having to adjust our general plan, our zoning, ordinances and stuff, I mean, it could get pricey, expensive.
Understood.
And it's not budgeted
Understood.
currently either.
Understood.
And so that would be a process. So it's almost like at that point, is this something that the city wants to do, is to go in and amend that plan? I mean, at that point, if we're not necessarily sure that maybe this plan's not gonna happen, maybe the council thinks into the possibility of repealing it and going through that process instead. That's easier for staff, and you wouldn't have to hire somebody to do that, because we would just put it through that process, if that's where you wanna go. Other options are trying to locate somebody that would maybe be able to construct it. I mean, there's a lot of different options, but I just want to make sure that council is aware of the potential costs that could be incurred moving in that direction.
So, okay, so you're talking about two options essentially, well, maybe three, but two. One would be amending the general plan to fit the zoning that the applicant is seeking. The other one would be repealing the plan that was adopted. Am I understanding that correctly?
Those are two options that come to mind, because for me as staff, if the council is going to move forward, and it's totally up to council, of course, if you're going to move forward with amending the plan and you're going to pay, $25,000 to amend the specific plan, another $25,000 to amend the general plan, $50,000. If I was in your position, and I am in the position as staff to look at, that's a great amount of money to put into a plan that maybe we're not using, so maybe it's easier better that we repeal it and do something in the future later on.
What would repealing it, sorry.
Time out a minute.
Repealing is the same process. If we're not interested in this plan, because I know that there have been comments where this is years out, we haven't done anything with it yet, we don't know if anything's gonna happen with it.
Time out.
Okay.
What I don't understand about all we've talked about is the bottom line is we have no utilities.
We have no utilities.
Okay, so we could change the zoning, which I have no
You
problem.
can change the zoning, but yeah, it doesn't affect.
There still doesn't do
utilities.
anything.
Yeah.
So we
Agreed.
should address how to get the water and sewer done, because everything else is a moot point. Because you can change the zoning all you want, but if you got no water and you got no sewer, so what?
Okay.
It's like buying a car with no gasoline in it.
I mean, and that is the hiccup.
So
that
we're
we-
talking about everything but the most important thing, which is the utilities.
There's also consideration that you guys haven't mentioned yet, is the other property owners in this business park. You own 13 acres that you're looking to change. We have how many other landowners in this that may still want this as described and prescribed, that was voted on and agreed upon by all the property owners back on that day, and they may please still be planning on, that's still what they want. And you're wanting to exit from that, may change what they feel they want to do. Or if we are going to look at possibly changing zoning, we can't do this in a vacuum with just one property owner, this whole facility here. You have to bring in all the property owners in and go, you're asking for this change. If we're going to make change for everybody.
And
Bring them all
that's-
in.
And
We
that's why
can't-
no matter if you amend it, repeal it, add to it, all of it has to go through public hearing.
Yeah.
And because it goes through a public hearing, we're notifying property owners, publishing it in the newspaper, and it's going to planning commission and council. And that's why the process takes so long, because it will require staff or consultant to reach out to those affected parties.
I think it's.
I think the property owners should be
So
absorbing
the
the change to the zoning, because they're the ones that agreed to it to begin with. So I don't think the city necessarily, if we're gonna look towards putting in infrastructure, that's one thing, but to make changes, I don't believe that's our place at this point. That's my opinion.
Maybe it's an item that we put on a future agenda after these other property owners have been notified of what's being discussed, to get their input before we move forward, maybe?
Let me ask you a question. Has there ever been an attempt to gather any consensus from the other property owners whether or not they could create a utility district? In other words, an agreement amongst all the owners of the properties that would say, hey, look, we'd like this to move forward, so let's talk about getting financing, and let's do the jack boring and the water and the sewer and the lift station, all those things that we need to make this move forward. Because everything we do means nothing unless that's done.
Noel Nagley, no.
No, I know Nate, I know he's not gonna do much.
He's not going to do anything.
So basically, what you have is you have a
Nothing.
couple people interested, but yet we have no money to buy the facility a utility or utilities. And that's the stumbling block right there.
But you know, before, this was quite a while back, talking about an above-ground sewer, I know a lot of people that don't have infrastructure, they do that.
Where
The
at?
above-ground
Roxanne,
septic.
give
We
us an
did that down in
example.
Turlock a long time ago. I'm not sure on McHenry where the facility is now, the RV facility.
That's in the county.
That's county.
That's county.
Okay, that's county, so then they're on, I guess, septic there.
I don't
And
know.
that's a practice for county. County doesn't have utilities, and so they allow for the construction of wells and the installation of septic systems because they don't charge for utilities, they don't have public systems. That's where the difference lies is for cities, when you're in the city limits, we have a sewer system, we
get
have a
it.
water system, yeah. And so if you wanted to deviate from our standard practices, which are requiring new development to hook up to water and sewer at their expense, because new development is supposed to pay its way, ideally, that's fine, but we'd need to establish policies and processes, and it would affect other properties in town. We have other properties in the town that are in the same boat where they can't develop and cannot put in wells or septic, and so they're taking that risk if they purchase the property, which is why a lot of them have sat on the market for several years, because it's not financially feasible for somebody to put in they can't put in a well or septic currently because we don't allow for it, and there's no line there. So in order for them to be able to connect to the system, and this is on Main Street headed towards Riverbank, they would have to extend the line 400 feet, the city's main line's 400 feet down the road in order to connect to it. And so that's a added expense,
Got it.
yeah.
I have a question. Roxanne, let's suppose in the great world we live in, there was a miracle and all of a sudden we gave you what you wanted. What's gonna happen?
You mean give me what? You mean as far as the zoning change?
Yes, then what happens?
Well, it's going to be a lot easier to sell based on what I'm allowed right now to do.
So you believe that the zoning is inhibiting the sale of the
Oh,
property?
absolutely.
Nothing to do with the utilities?
Well, the utilities too, but this is a major factor. Even if I had the utilities there, nobody would do this. I mean, for, administrative offices, professional, medical, dental, glassware, glass blowing, drugstore, hardware, variety store.
Yeah, it's pretty
It took
crazy.
out my grocery store, it took out my gas stations, it took out all of these things.
When that
And
happened,
it's given me no
how long ago
conditional-
did that happen?
Back in 2007.
Why in 2007 you say something?
Well, was being sold.
Oh, I see.
And it was also a different world. I mean, there was a lot more small retail. There was a lot more need for office space here in town. Like, I don't think any of this had started yet, had it, where we're at? But the other thing is that if you want a property owner to put in infrastructure, but you limit what they can build on that property that's never going to support the expense of the infrastructure, your
I
land
agree.
is
That's a good
essentially
point.
locked.
That's a valid point. That's valid.
Well, and that's why I almost want to go back a step further, and you had mentioned that there was a well there, and I know what our city policy is, But again, I think in this particular situation, I don't know what the expense would be to jackbore underneath the state highway to connect with the system. I do know there's other situations in town that have wells. Of course, when the well goes dry, they got hooked to the city. And we've seen those situations, and they have found that it's actually a lot more reasonable to hook into the city water with their situation versus drilling a new well.
Right.
This situation, however, might be the opposite. And I'm wondering if we need to look at having a sense of flexibility to be able to make something like this happen. Unfortunately, if your well ever went dry, you're probably my gut feeling is you're probably gonna be money ahead to drill a new well.
Hey, the city
Okay.
used my well at one time, many years ago.
So, I mean, again, that's another thought, and when I mentioned what I mentioned a little while ago, it was also with the caveat is, listen, if we want to make something happen in here, maybe this should be a consideration too, regarding allowing the well, okay, and possibly even up around sewer, just because of the expense is cost prohibitive to make anything happen here with going underneath the state highway. I don't know.
That sounds good to me, Robert.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with it, provided we had something in place that guaranteed we'd have money going towards a improved system, because putting a sewer out there and you selling the property and you're gone, and the next person says, well, I'm not gonna put any money towards the upgrades of this property because, you know, and I bought it, it was this way it was. We have to be careful on that, because if we do set that precedence, we're gonna deal with it all along the so we have to be careful.
You gotta define
I have no opposition to your idea of well and sewer. I think I'm the one who shared that with you a long time ago.
Yes,
I don't have a problem with that. But
and Jeff.
it has to be done in a way that we cover the backlash if it happens.
Exactly.
We also have to make sure that we have a district set up where you're putting money, or whoever's buying that property is putting money into it, so we have money going into the future of that enterprise, of the infrastructure that needs to be put in there, because ultimately it's gonna go in. There's no way that thing's gonna survive out there with a bunch of septic tanks. It's not gonna work.
No, but couldn't there be some kind of stipulation, even if the property's sold and developed, that, you know, when the infrastructure is available, they have to tie in?
When you say it's available, see, I'm a little confused. When it's available is when the people that own those properties have enough
So
money.
it's up to the property owners.
Yes. It is,
to
absolutely.
Service us, even though it's all annexed to the city?
We don't normally, listen, we normally do not supply utilities. Now, if, for example, if we're doing a housing project, yeah, we do. But that's written into the cost of that project. That's how those things are done. We're not gonna go out on a piece of property on the other side of the highway. We don't have an agreement out there with anybody, we don't have developer fees coming in to offset some of the costs. We don't have any of that stuff. So
It
it's,
was all annexed.
it's annexed, but it's never been a housing project, for example. Again,
I thought it had to have.
No, we would have development
services.
fees coming in for that.
where?
All this, we would have, it's annexed into the city,
It's
right?
annexed, but my point is this, when we do like a housing project, monies are collected for all of that stuff.
Correct.
Then we bring the utilities to them. They don't get them first.
Right,
That's
right,
my
right.
point, and that's
Yeah.
my point about this situation, is that we need to have an agreement with everybody there, and like a developer's agreement, where they're willing to pay for this stuff, so we can have those funds to get that stuff over there. Because the cities normally don't just throw water lines and sewer lines out there.
Right, but now, okay, let's just think about this, because you've got all the industrial in the back. So say, I mean, is there gonna be some kind of sunset period, or is it just going to, you know, go on forever?
What's that?
If the people, if all the frontage, the commercial's taking the blunt of it to bring the infrastructure over.
Well, it's not just everyone who belongs to that park has a piece of that debt.
Okay, but when are they going to have to put into that?
When we have a plan that everyone agrees on, then we can move forward on. That's the problem.
Okay, so when they have a plan to develop it.
If we had a plan that everyone's in agreement to the plan for developing it, and they're all on board, and we had a written agreement, they were gonna do this, this, and this, and we collected fees from each one of those individuals as part of development going on, then we would have the funds to extend that line over there.
Gotcha. However, if the commercial develops first,
Well, first of all, Roxanne, what I'm trying to tell you is, it's either all grouped together, or it's not gonna fly because of the financial burden.
It's not a
That's
if
what
you
I'm-
build it, they will come kind of situation for the city. We can't do
Right.
that.
It's gonna have to be a combined effort by the property owners who can agree on a enterprise, or a utility district that they're willing to found, create, and then once that's set up, then the city has a development agreement with them, and then we can move forward. We just can't extend it out there. I mean, it doesn't happen that way.
where are we with the, on Brennan?
On Brennan, I don't know. I know that there's some progress being made. I believe that property is being looked at by Floorshine, and the owners are trying to get the property annexed. Am I correct in this?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's, the municipal service review is being updated for that parcel to be able to move forward. And we've already talked to the future developer about stubbing utilities as far as we can go to that area.
Correct.
And at that time, which was a few years ago, they were open to it. We're meeting again with them, I believe, next week.
When that sewer line goes
Catch
in,
up.
they have to consider the fact that across the street's gonna be developed someday, so that line has to make big enough to accommodate that development and the future development across the street.
And to bring it down to the end of his development.
Correct.
We can only develop as big as the current line exists in the ground.
That's the other problem. That's why I'm suggesting,
Yeah.
when that
And I
development
don't know what
starts.
that is.
And we can't make them
Do
serve it
future.
for the future. So they're stubbing it basically to the railroad
And that's
as far,
fine.
as close as we can get to the
Right.
tracks. And then at some point, we'd have to work with the railroad, which will take
Jack Moore.
several years to get it across the tracks.
Correct.
And then, yeah, the line can change.
But I'm thinking that when that development does come about, we should consider at that time the impact. Because if they ever develop across the street there, and that line's just a little line just to take care of what's there, then we're gonna have to deal with that whole problem again. Do you follow what I'm saying here?
I do.
I guess my question is that at Brennan and 120 where the proposed, all of the utilities would go across? Is that what was decided?
That's where they go.
Okay, I'm just curious, because we have other railroad tracks we could go under that doesn't necessarily go under 120. I didn't know we had services over by the Taco Bell on that side where you just come across under those.
I think we're talking about, first of all, you know, the fact that it was annexed in without having any sort of city services there is interesting to me. I don't know the history of that, but I think what we have before us tonight is a property owner who is seeking just an amendment of the zoning so that there's more options there, that so she can sell it and possibly bring in somebody who wants to tie in and wants to make that investment. So I don't know, I still don't have a problem with that. I don't know that it's a huge deal to just change the zoning, even if it's a general plan amendment or if it's an appeal, but that's still where I'm at.
Yeah, and I agree with Councilmember Crummack. I think that regardless of what situation we're looking at, whether it's sold to somebody else and then they realize that there's not going to be any that they have to put in their own infrastructure, or if a situation comes in that's going to be attractive enough that we may want to be looking at, you know, allowing them to use that well in that spot. I think that it's got to start with a loosened zoning. I mean, I just can't think of what else we're going to do. I don't know if you will ever get all of these owners in agreement. It sounds like some of them just simply moved on.
Yeah.
You know, and whereas it does sound like a wonderful plan. I mean, what's the path of least resistance? Pulling Roxanne out of the plan and therefore killing off the plan, or rezoning her the frontage?
I mean, we've talked about this a few times. I mean, we've really never given the plan time to move forward. It got adopted,
Right.
and then everything fell apart after that with the economy. And so, and obviously because we were a smaller city, we recovered much slower than larger cities
Sure.
do. And so we're right now at the point where I feel like now and moving forward, we might be able to find somebody that would be interested in developing. But as we've talked about in the past too, there's multiple property owners. And so we know when there's
Right.
multiple property owners and not everybody's in agreement, it may not work out. Everybody has a different idea of how much their property's worth, what they see for it, you know, and so it would be a process to find somebody to do that. But from what I see in things, especially what's moving forward now is there are companies out there looking for land, whether it's short-term, long-term, they're looking to develop, they're looking for something quick. The upside being because we have a specific plan already adopted, we already have exactly what we want in this document of what needs to go there, and so that's the upside. A lot of these companies have the money and infrastructure. Whether or not we'd be able to attract them, I don't know.
Well, and that's where I
But
think
we haven't
Councilmember,
given them
yeah.
a chance either, so.
That's where I think Councilmember Crummack and I are coming from in terms of what can you do to make this more attractive, you know, and possibly opening up the zoning possibilities might be the first salvo in making it more attractive.
Yeah, you can't hurt anything by giving it more options.
You can't, but it's a cost. And so
Understood.
is the council willing to pay that amount of money to make that update?
Here's,
I mean,
yeah.
And right now it would be the update for just the 12-acre parcel. And so if you're going in there, you might as well
Sure.
get the whole thing going, but it comes at a cost, and so
Well,
that's
Where
what
would the
you're
funds
willing
come
to
from?
do.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Where are the funds coming from if we do it?
It's not budgeted currently.
I understand
No,
that. Where
general
would they
fund.
come from is the question.
So, I mean, typically, if it's for new development, updating existing plans, I mean, it's either gonna be general fund or development impact.
It's not coming out of the general fund.
then
So
development
it'd have to
impact.
be, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we know what the balance is in that fee, on that account right now?
I can tell you from our last treasurer's report, which would be November, so it shouldn't be too bad.
One sec here. I'm at the end here.
I'm still, like, not to beat a dead horse here, but I'm still just curious why we can't get further clarification on similar use for retail or office.
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
So the definition of office
Right.
is administrative, business, professional, medical, dental, or similar use.
Okay.
I would think that if the council could agree to a set of parameters for similar use, that it wouldn't take $50,000 to expand what that definition is.
Okay, that's fine. That's an interesting approach.
And the same thing with retail, because
Yeah, it could be anything.
That's
Yeah.
probably a really,
Retail's anything.
that's probably a really good idea, because, yeah, you're right. Define similar approach. You know, somebody came up to us, hey, Sutter wants to build a medical center here. Is that
When I
a
say similar
similar use?
use under office, that means it's some sort of an office in some sort of a definition. It would not be a grocery store or gas station in any way, shape, or form. Under the term, if we were to define similar use under the office category, it's some sort of an office.
what about
For some
retail?
sort of a business. I don't see where it says there's any similar use under retail.
Well, we assumed that the last time I was here, that it would be something similar to it.
Retail store, you know, Oakdale Cheese Company has a retail store. That, to me, that's a retail store.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? Hillmar Cheese Company has a retail store. That's a retail store. And that's where I'm getting at. I mean, you know, if I had a dime for every time I've heard somebody in this town say, we need to develop that 120 corridor, I could have paid for the infrastructure already.
Exactly.
Okay? And so that's why I think that if we're serious about really trying to make something happen, we've got the basis of the, we've got the beginning of something really good here. What can we do to make it happen? And that's why I think that, and I like your idea too. I mean, I don't know if that gives you much assurance, Roxanne, but define similar use.
Do you want to define similar use? You want to leave it open so that you
I'll
can
leave it
apply?
open.
I would leave it open. You don't
Leave
change
it wide
it.
open.
Leave it wide open. You wouldn't define similar use at all, I wouldn't
I
think.
want them to come up and say, Hillmar Cheese Company's talked to us. Is that a similar use? Yep, similar use. Sounds
But
good.
now that falls under commercial manufacturing or light industrial. Now, it's actually, yeah, it's
all
permitted use, but it's not dairy or wholesaling dairy, fruits, nuts, vegetables, honey, confections. That does not fall under my division anymore, how
Well, okay, you know, you nursery you're talking about, why is
it's.
that?
Nursery, everything was permitted. under
Retail
the
store.
too.
Oh,
Yeah,
retail
permitted.
store. That's a retail store. That's, to me, that's a similar use.
Yeah,
Well,
but
these
they're
are
growing.
examples. These
I
aren't,
know.
I wouldn't
This
say
is
they're
art
definitions,
code.
they're examples. There's a retail stores, that's a definition that's pretty broad. I mean, you can't just say it's,
But maybe we should keep it very, very broad, and maybe we should save about 50 grand.
there you go.
And like what you're saying, it's come up to us, hey, you know,
There needs to be an avenue for someone that's interested in developing the property in whatever capacity.
Right.
Come here and not be told, well, it's gonna be 18 months, it's gonna cost $50,000, and it might not
well,
happen.
that's what I'm saying. This might
It's
be
also
out
gonna
our
cost the
situation.
infrastructure.
Retail
Right.
store, Restorff Nursery wants us to open up a second branch, let's say, for that, at retail store, you know?
Mr. Mayor, this is, sorry, Councilmember Swift, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's City Attorney Mark Velasquez. I had a suggestion. If we're talking about the definition, my suggestion, if the council wants to, is send it to Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission will work with the City Attorney's Office to further define what similar uses is. And that is a low cost / no cost option for maybe some of the movement that the petitioner is seeking.
That's a
May
good
I also
idea.
suggest maybe the public comment at this point might be helpful to bring up some ideas
Okay,
for solutions.
we can do that. Before we do that, I want to ask Roxanne, if in fact it's acceptable to you, if we were able to take this back to the planning commission for more of a definition, would you wait before you decide to do anything?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so
Now,
why don't you have a seat and we'll take some public comment, and
okay.
after that, we're gonna recommend that we go back to the planning commission for more discussion and definition with the city attorney's help, and we'll move from that direction. How's that sound?
Absolutely fine, and absolutely on retail also, to clarify.
I think you got the message.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, ladies.
very much for your time. Sorry to keep you so late.
Oh, no, hey.
No,
We're
no
here
big
for
deal.
you. That's what we get the big bucks. What?
One last question I have, and I
Sure.
forgot about this. You know, I know that this has been adopted. but the map was a conceptual map.
Okay.
And I never did sign a vesting map. So does that make a difference at all?
I don't know. Ask the city attorney that one. Mark?
So the maps in here are for the specific plan. If she, the type of map, when she's talking about vesting and stuff, those are like subdivision parcel maps.
right.
I don't believe we have any of those.
Because we never got that far.
So that's never even been done.
Right.
Yeah.
We never got that
So
far.
that's to subdivide property as a
No, it's
separate
not a good
action.
thing. Because if we'd had those, then we'd had an idea what was going to happen out there, and we would have been further along down.
Then I
the
could
road.
never change it though. Right now, if I had to, well.
Right now, it's pretty open, yeah. I think we can.
So you could
work with
still
that.
subdivide your property.
Exactly.
Yeah, you could still subdivide if you wanted to subdivide because the specific plan is addressing the uses, not the land.
Right.
But those lots would still be subject to the specific plan, so you could, you
So I
mentioned
still
in the
have to have the
past.
street even though it was just a conceptual?
If we're looking at a subdivision map and you're looking at subdividing your property, we're just looking at your one parcel, as long as it meets the subdivision map act for the number of parcels. And also our zoning requirements, which in the commercial area are very minimal.
Right.
You would be able to subdivide them, but they'd still be subject to the specific plan.
Right.
And still a part of the specific plan, just subdivided.
So I could go ahead and subdivide and put them in 4 parcels.
You would, in a subdivision map, if you did 4 or more.
Right. Then I'd have to get into that whole
You
public.
go to planning commission and
Report,
city council
yeah.
for subdivision map,
Yeah,
correct?
okay. 4 or less, right?
And, or it might be, yeah, 4 or less,
yeah.
5 or more, correct. However, we would have to look at the, because typically when they're in city limits, we ask to put in infrastructure, but
it's a
in
minor
this case.
subdivision.
Yeah, in this case, we'd have to find out what exactly would be required in order to allow for that subdivision. But the potential is there, and that's aside from the specific plan.
Okay, I'll let it go at that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're
for
welcome.
your time.
All right, we're going to open input from the audience. Anyone like to come up and speak on behalf of this item? And give us your name, please.
Gary Haskin. I don't mean to speak against your project at all. First and foremost, the infrastructure has never been paid for somebody else's project to turn a profit and take it out of taxpayer money. We don't take taxpayer money and support or subsidize any kind of development. To a well would be kind of tricky because we've got this new ordinance from the county, from the state. How many straws are we going to put into our water table before the city itself is in trouble? Septics I hate. They're poison. No matter how you do it, sooner or later, it's going to end up in the groundwater. Now, having said that, what's the possibility, I have to ask the city attorney, well, I'm doing this like Ed, I'm looking up at him, of grandfathering in the commercial zoning that was in place when the development took place, when the subdivision was made. There were certain C2 zoning that was in place, which is totally different than what Roxanne has to deal with now. So if she could go back to that original zoning, which we talked about changing zoning, just grandfather the existing zoning at that time. Is that legally possible?
I don't know. That's what we have attorneys for. Mark?
I was looking up, so I was talking to the attorney.
I don't really give legal advice over at open meetings, but I could tell you in the short, that ship has sailed. That was the whole point of the specific plan. It changed the use. So, the short version, the ship has sailed 20 years ago. And when you're grandfathering in, you do it as part of the new codes, right? It says what can be grandfathered in and not. You can't go back 20 years and do that now.
So the specific plan changed the C2 zoning right from the get-go? Or was the specific plan subject to, at that time, the current C2 zoning requirements?
Well, the specific plan with the chains, there were several things that happened. The specific plan, the general plan was changed, as well as the zoning. That was all part of this concept for this area.
Yes, the zoning changed to a C2. And what I'm saying, what was the C2 requirements at that time, and can that be grandfathered for this project?
Well, that's what I
This
was
is Ann,
Go
this
ahead.
is Ann Saprell. No, it cannot be grandfathered in. The zoning changed with the specific plan.
Okay, thank you.
All
Good
righty
idea,
then.
though. Good idea.
Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak on this matter? Is there anyone tuned in this evening on the internet that would like to speak, or on a telephone that would like to comment? Okay, since no one's gonna move forward here on this, we'll come back to the council. Council members, the suggestion's been made that we would probably entertain the idea of taking this back to the planning commission with the guidance of the city attorney to redevelop or design definitions for the use of that property. Do we need any sort of motion for that?
Or just consensus?
No,
Just consensus?
This is Mark Velasquez. Consensus is fine. You can do a motion if you want to be specific, if you feel like there'll be some pushback from the planning council. And just to clarify, it's for the planning commission to define or clarify what that term other similar uses mean.
I don't know how they're gonna do that without narrowing things up. I mean, there are so many different types of businesses out there now that could come in and really make a positive impact, and I think until you are asked, hey, what do you think about this? Which kind of sort of puts you in a bit of a tight spot, because you know, you don't know until you ask. I am a little nervous about having them further define stuff, and,
But do you think it can get worse?
So the.
well, I think it's almost better the way it is now. Yeah, I do think it could get worse, yes, yes.
Specific plan has a lot of language in there that talks about it, like its intent and specifies what this plan was for, which it looks like it's for tourism and trying to lure people into town. And so I think that if they went through the specific plan and read those uses and identified all of that, they would be able to better clarify.
Expand on it?
That, expand on what's already in there.
Okay,
So
because I
we
think
can give it a little bit more.
you mentioned tourism. Half of the things that are mentioned under tourism that would attract people to this town, being vegetables, food processing, honey, fruits, nuts, everything like that, technically as of right now are not allowed. And so that's why I think that we need to look at this with a very broad brush. And I think one of your hooks is retail, because all those things are fantastic retail items. But again, will this be allowed? I think that it's got to be looked at with a very open, broad brush, not with an narrow brush. And that's why I'm nervous about
They're
having
talking
them define it.
on those items. You can sell those items. They're talking about processing and wholesaling. It's having a processing plant there.
Yeah, but you named me a place, like, for example, let's go with a brewery. They brew the beer, they sell the beer. You know, they make the honey, they sell the honey.
Retail.
They make the, yeah, I mean, you're both. Every example I just mentioned, there, from a Hillmar, Oakdale Cheese, to all these places,
We
they
wouldn't
do
put those
both
there, though.
there. So we have to be open enough to allow them to do both there. Okay?
You
So
wouldn't put a Hillmar cheese
Councilmember
as a gateway to this town,
This
though.
is Mark
Well,
Velasquez.
not Hillmar.
Hang on
cheese,
just a
yes,
I-
cheese.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and it very well may be that the planning commission comes back with a definition or a suggestion for a definition that doesn't assist this particular property owner. But at least at that point, then there is now guidance, and we now know what would need to be changed in the future if there's going to be zoning change amendments. Plus, it would give some clarity to the property owners to know exactly what they can and can't market.
Mark, and the reason for that is because anybody coming up with an idea for a business, they would have to be going through the planning commission first? Correct?
Correct.
So if we,
yes,
so if
that is
Roxanne,
true.
okay, so if Roxanne has a feeling as to what they would, how they would go on some of this stuff. But in other words, bottom line, are they going to narrow it finally or narrow broadly? And I think that, I see your point in that case.
Okay, gentlemen, so where are we? Sure, go ahead.
The only thing the other thing I'm concerned about too is what, on my C2 property, the 2 office and retail, is also allowed under the commercial manufacturing and also under the light industrial. So they can do anything I can do, but I can't do anything that they're able to do. I have no conditional use permit.
I think that's because of the location and the design of the facility. When you look at, you're on the corridor for 120 and Brennan as a entrance into the city.
Right.
The city, when they were planning this development, aren't interested in having a trucking warehouse on that corner as an entrance to the city. They want more retail to try and drive some of the commercialism and the tourism. So that's why that's not included.
But I'm actually competing with the commercial manufacturing and the light industrial.
Possibly, not guaranteed, but that's a possibility.
Yeah, it's right here, that they have the same, they can do the same I can on the manufacturing and the light industrial.
For the office space.
For the office space, and they can also do the retail.
For the CM, for the commercial manufacturing, yes.
Yeah, they've got the art supply, glassware, drugstore.
I guess I would, given the discussion and what we're trying to accomplish, instead of just a consensus, maybe to Mayor Pro Tem Swift's point, we make it more firm as to what we're trying to accomplish, being we open up the definitions of retail or what's available on that property. So maybe a motion with a vote in that direction is more appropriate.
Would that trigger a change in those plans and require us to spend money? Mark?
No, I would suggest that this motion be worded very generally. In other words, the intent could be specific, i.e. the planning commission to, identify uses and further clarify uses as it's currently written, or something similar to, again, the motion being very general, that we just move forward at looking at potential changes to the uses.
Okay,
So it's not binding.
We've come to that point before. Now, we've had a hiccup. The hiccup is Mr. Swift seems to be concerned that may not fly the way it should. So what do we got to do to get past that?
I just think the real world, I think there's so many possibilities out there. I mean, you
Well,
can't.
let me ask you this. Why don't we do this? Why don't we take the risk and have the planning commission review it based on what we're asking, which is to define these things a little more openly so people can have a little more leeway and see what they come up with. When they come back to us, we'll have an idea where we're at. At this point, we have nothing. That is the only thing we got to go for right now to move forward.
Well,
Can we go with that, please?
Yeah, well, let's just do that, because I think you're right. At the
thank
Mark's
you.
point, at least that'll give you some direction. Hey, and if they define it too narrowly, then I think we need to look at working on the zoning.
All right, I'll accept a motion.
Is there any way that before they put that in stone, that we can come back and look at it and maybe do some amendments? Go through, or?
You'd have to work with the planning commission on that, I would
Right.
imagine.
Yeah, no, we would definitely notify you when that's gonna be at that meeting, so that you could come and talk to them about that, for sure.
Okay, so let's have a motion for the.
You want a motion or a
move forward.
consensus?
I feel comfortable with a consensus.
Okay, then let's do a consensus. How's that? All those in favor?
Yes.
Okay, all those opposed? We have a 4-0 consensus to move forward on the recommendation of the city attorney, which was to shift it back to the planning commission for a relook. All right?
Thank you.
Now, let's move on to item number 8. All right, where are we? Item number 8, just a minute. Give me a moment here, I'm getting all this stuff scattered everywhere. All right. Item number 8, consideration of approving appointments of council members to various committees/commissions. Staff.
Thank you, Mayor. So this item was to
Let's get table content.
basically, after former Mayor Pro Tem Legero left the council, there were positions he was seated on outside of city as a representative of the city that we need to update. However, I realize we do have a council member that was unable to make the meeting, and so if you do
I
not
would
want to move
prefer-
forward with this, we can continue.
I would like to
next.
continue it, please.
Okay. we can continue this to the next.
Perfect. Let's move on to item number 9. Annual report of AB 1600 fees as required by government code. Staff.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Before you tonight is the annual AB 1600 report. This is a report required to be provided to the council, to the community, and it is in regards to development impact fees. These are not user fees. These are one-time fees assessed on new development. And so there is a report here. This report is through the end of the fiscal year 2021, so through June 30th of 21. And it basically provides for you what fees have been received and how they have been spent. There's also a listing of fund definitions, what each fund holds, certain requirements of how the money can be spent and how it will be received. These figures on this report tie to the financials that are being audited by your external auditors. These reports have also been distributed to the local BIA, and they are in receipt of them and have provided that confirmation to us. Oh, and this report was provided online and elsewhere as of December 15th, 2021. So this meeting is just to recognize them formally. We've received no comments other than the comment from the BIA that they received a report, and thank you for the report. So we've received no other comments from the public on this.
Mayor and council, this is just an annual required public hearing, so just all you need to do is hold a public hearing, close the public hearing, and approve the report.
After I take input from the audience, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone in the audience have anything they'd like to speak with regards to this item? Is there anyone on the phones or the internet that would like to have anything to say about this item? Having received no input back, I will move back to the council for a motion.
Well, I move that we accept the annual report of AB 1600 fees as required by government code.
Thank you very much.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carries 4-0. All right, perfect. Now we're moving into item number 10. Item number 10, introduction and waiving of the first reading of ordinance 30, amending or adopting chapter 1712-00-1, accessory building 17.12.015, carport structures 17.4.195, list, let's see where we're at here. List of permits, use permits by conditional use permits by zoning district, and 17.43.020, numbers of off-street spaces required as recommended by the Planning Commission. Staff.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Before I move into the staff report, I just wanted to give a kudos to my assistant planner, Diana Trejo. She took the lead on this item and went through, fine-tooth combed everything, worked with the Planning Commission, as well as Ann Ciprell, who sat in on this as well. And then we also have our building official on the line, Mike Brinkman. All of them have worked over the last few planning commissions on getting this item together. And so I wanted to thank them all in advance for the amount of time and work that we've put into this item. As you were aware, it was a work in process for the last several months. And so we're happy to bring this forward to council. So a little background and overview on this item. In 2019, the city received an application for a conditional use permit and variance for a 500 square foot metal carport to be located on a residential side yard on Genevieve Drive. The Planning Commission reviewed the application in accordance with the municipal code and it denied the application. The applicant appealed the denial, and the City Council, who overturned Planning Commission's decision and approved the application. The City Council then directed staff to bring amendments to sections of the municipal code that would allow for these types of structures. At the September 15, 2020 Planning Commission meeting, city staff presented draft red lines of proposed amendments to various chapters of the municipal code. The Planning Commission deliberated on each of the chapter's amendments, agreed upon additional edits to what staff presented, and approved their recommendations to be shared to the City Council. City Council reviewed the Planning Commission recommendations on the municipal code amendments and approved the changes, which became effective in November of 2020. In September of 2021, the city received a code enforcement complaint about an unpermitted accessory structure on the side yard of a house on Jonathan Court. Staff followed up on the complaint and confirmed that the structure was both unpermitted and did not meet municipal code requirements. A code enforcement notice was sent to the property owner advising of options for correcting the violations. The property owner contacted city staff to discuss the notice and then later advised that he would apply for a variance on the property. He also reached out to council for assistance on the case and proposed to the council that the municipal code be amended to allow for these types of structures. So Mayor Alves and Mayor Pro Tem Legero at that time then requested that the interim city manager add an item on the council agenda to discuss carports and similar temporary structures. This discussion item was placed on the September 20th, 2021 City Council agenda, where it was the consensus of council that the code enforcement proceedings for these types of structures be temporarily paused until the temporary structure ordinance could be amended. Staff advised the council that there would be a process involved as ordinance amendments related to Title 17 zoning are required to be reviewed by both Planning Commission and City Council for potential amendments. Per council's request, the Planning Commission reviewed, discussed, and suggested edits to the sections of the municipal code at their November 9th meeting. The Planning Commission determined that further research and information was needed regarding the California Building Code and thus continued the item to the following meeting. At the December 14th Planning Commission meeting, further information was presented on this topic, and the Planning Commission finalized their recommendations on edits to these sections of the municipal code. And we have to see additional comments under discussion of recommended amendments. At staff's request, the Planning Commission also reviewed Municipal Code Section 17.11.040, which is the list of permitted uses and uses permitted by conditional use permit by zoning district for edits regarding commercial parking lots, solar/shade structures, and Chapter 17.43020, number of off-street spaces for edits requiring the construction of a garage with the new single or two-family residential homes. So for discussion, Section 17.12010, accessory buildings, which is Exhibit A, carport structures are being removed from the chapter on accessory buildings and being given their own subsequent chapter. For Section 17.12015, carport structures, which is Exhibit B, this chapter is proposed directly below 17.12010, accessory buildings, and solely addresses carport structures. Updates include clarifying the title of the chapter, allowing carport structure attachment to the dwelling or other accessory buildings, limiting the carport structure height, requiring Planning Commission approval for carport structures over 450 square feet, and aligning the setback requirements to mirror the minimum standards of the California Building Code. It is important to note that the current California Building Code applies to all construction, regardless whether or not the city has incorporated it into the municipal code, and that neither the Planning Commission nor the City Council has legal authority to waive the requirements of the CBC through variance or other means. Accordingly, the city council may impose more restrictive, but not less restrictive setbacks and other standards than the CBC. The Planning Commission's recommended amendments are intended to incorporate the current setback requirements contained in the California Building Code, but property owners must meet all current California Building Code requirements in order to obtain a building permit regardless of any inconsistent provision in the zoning code or action by both the Planning Commission or City Council. The staff is recommending an additional edit to this section that a carport structure cannot block dwelling windows and doors. As these details are reviewed by the building department before permit issuance, it is critical for an applicant to review their available layout options prior to purchasing the plans and carport structure. Chapter 17.41195, temporary structures other than construction buildings, labeled Exhibit C. Section B is removed in its entirety as carport structures would now be addressed in Chapter 17.12015. Section 17.81040C definitions, marked Exhibit D. The existing definition for carport is updated to remove the word permanent and modified to include the sheltering of automobiles, vehicles, RVs, and vessels. Section 17.81210T definitions, labeled as Exhibit E. It is proposed to delete temporary structures from the T definitions sections as carport structures would now be addressed elsewhere. Section 17.11.040, list of permitted uses and uses permitted by conditional use permit by zoning district, labeled as Exhibit F. Updates to this section of the municipal code would clarify that commercial/industrial locations can install shade/solar carport structures in the parking lot without needing Planning Commission review. These types of projects would still receive Planning Department and Building Department review. Section 17.43020, number of off-street spaces required, labeled as Exhibit G. Updates to this section would require that new or rebuilt single-family or two-family residential homes also construct a 2 parking space garage per living unit to meet the parking requirement. Therefore, Council hold a public hearing and consider the adoption of or amendments to the following chapters of the Municipal Code: 17.12010 accessory buildings, 17.12015 carport structures, 17.41.195 temporary structures other than construction buildings, 17.81040 C definitions, 17.81.210 T definitions, and 17.11.040 list of permitted uses and uses permitted by conditional use permit by zoning district, and 17.43020 number of off-street spaces required. And so we have also listed the exhibits in case we want to refer back to them. And then we have attached the ordinance. Tonight is the introduction and waiving of the first reading, where you would conduct your public hearing, discuss the ordinance amendments, and then ask the input of the public as to any comments or feedback they have regarding these amendments. And then, depending on what changes are made, we would bring it back to the next meeting. If no additional edits are made, it would be a second reading and adoption, but if additional minutes or amendments are made, we may need to bring it back as a reintroduction, depending on what those are. And so if you have any questions of staff, obviously I would hope to answer them. We also have legal counsel on the line, as well as our building official, Mike Brinkman, with
I have a
CSG
question.
Consultants.
My question is, what became of the anonymous tip situation? Because when we were asked to give input, one of the inputs I gave is that. I want to know why we have that, and why is it we continue. The fourth, I think it's the Fourth or Sixth Amendment, says that we're able to address our accusers. And I feel like that's kind of being taken away from us. So the idea when people can report on something like that, we don't even know who they are. We don't know if it's staff. We don't know who it is. I just think that's a real bad situation.
And so that's something I refer back to legal counsel on. It is it is a legal law, and so I'll let.
I want a
legal
second
counsel
opinion.
do
If
that.
our counsel, if our legal counsel suggests that's a good idea, I want a second opinion out of their independent opinion.
Mayor Alvarez, that is correct. I do believe, and I have explained to staff that anonymous reporting is actually a better practice than non-anonymous reporting. It prevents retaliation. It is permitted. This is an administrative proceedings, not criminal proceedings where your reference to the Constitution would apply.
I don't believe that it's a situation that's a good one. I still don't think we should have a situation where people supposedly are complaining, which we have no idea who they are. I think that to me is a bad message. It sends a bad message.
The idea is that if people were required to identify themselves, they would never complain.
That's insane.
It would.
That's some
yes,
people that was true. I believe you're right in some respects, but I'll tell you right now, if I got a situation I want someone to know
I
about.
would say is that question is really beside the point. That's not on the agenda. That's not what we're talking about.
Wait a minute. It is on the agenda because part of this whole ordinance being redone was part of the questions we were asked to input. And my input was.
You're asking a question about code enforcement.
What do you think this
procedures,
is?
And that's not what's on the agenda. What
This
we
is
have
code
here is
enforcement.
proposed zoning amendments.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I don't think we need to pass that up. I want to know their opinion, independent of this staff, to address this issue, because I don't believe this is a correct way to deal with this.
Well, if the council as a whole would like a written legal opinion, we will provide that.
I don't want it from this staff. I want it from an independent staff.
Well, that's at the pleasure of the council.
Well, I would like to see it.
I think the concern is, especially with something like this, and by the way, I don't have any issue with this. I think the planning commission did an excellent job. Everybody, the staff did an excellent job with security as close as we can, allowing as much we can within the new California building code. I think the concern is what can be done to minimize the weaponization of this in town between neighbors and things like that.
On the one hand, it protects the person complaining. At the same time, it also protects that person from not being identified from retaliation. It's not a good system. Anybody that's concerned enough to complain should be up there front and say, listen, I don't approve of what you're suggesting here. I don't like what you're doing. I'd like it to be reviewed. There's nothing wrong with that approach. But to sneak behind and say, well, so-and-so's this, so-and-so's that doesn't cut it. It's just not right.
Well, it depends on the neighbor situation. Not all neighbors get along, Ed.
I know.
So there's a lot of contentious situations where you've got somebody who is being intimidated that wants to do something, and if it's out of code, it's out of a code, and it's irrelevant at that point. So I don't think you're gonna get this to change.
I think it needs to be addressed. And I think it'd be nice to have a written opinion.
I don't think that question needs to be answered in order to deal with the item that's on the agenda.
I agree.
If you'd like to ask another law firm to give you an opinion on that, that's fine and well, but that's really not what we're here to talk about tonight.
To me, it was all part of the same thing, Ann. It was part of the reason this came back to us, that there was concern, myself, the pro tem, we both discussed it, and we both felt that's something that needs to change. That's why we brought it up, and that's why I'm bringing it up again. You can sit there and tell me what you choose to based on your legal information, that's fine. But I can tell you right now, the consensus of this community doesn't like it. And if it was a drug-related, something like that, I can understand that, where people turn in people for drugs. That's criminal stuff, I get it. This is neighbor turning in neighbor, and we don't know whether it's because the buildings are incorrect or it's a personal matter that's gotten out of hand. We're weaponizing these people.
Well, it doesn't really matter why. If a complaint is turned into the code enforcement, then the code enforcement officer needs to find out whether the situation is legal or not. And if it doesn't meet building code, for example, then it must be corrected, regardless of the motive.
I can go through this town, Ann, and I can find a million things wrong. If I really wanted to, they're out there.
Well, why don't we continue this, this portion as a suggestion? I've got an idea on council communications. Have we started the public hearing yet?
Not yet.
No.
Well, you're on the agenda item.
Right.
And no, you haven't opened it for public comment or public hearing.
We don't have a public hearing tonight.
We do have a
You have
public
to,
hearing.
you just
We do.
haven't done
We
it.
do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have to open it.
All right, well, let's open it
Are
up.
there any questions about the staff report or any of the proposed amendments?
Well, all right, we'll ask right now. Does anyone in the audience have anything to add to or ask about this particular item? If so, please come to the podium. Anyone online? Anyone who has telephone listening in? Okay, no one. All right. So it comes back.
Yeah, actually, I do have a question on the item, and that is, the location must be located, the structure, cart structure, I want to, just for a point of clarification, must be located a minimum of 10 feet behind the front wall of the house. So I'm assuming you have the front wall of the house, then you have the fence, and then is that 10 feet behind that?
Hold on one
I'm just trying to picture.
I would think that if your garage is the
Ruben can answer
most
that
forward.
question.
Sorry.
That's more of a planning zoning setback requirement, not a building code.
Yeah, I just
Which-
point of clarification.
Can you tell me which item you're looking
Yeah,
at?
yeah,
I
yeah.
apologize.
It is. Oh, boy, on page 391,
Number 9.
number
at the bottom.
9. It's more so a point of clarification more than anything else. Well, here's the bottom line. Did this come straight out of the California Building Code?
So as our building official indicated, that's a planning item. So let's see, side yard, location, carport structures placed in the side yard must be located a minimum of 10 feet behind the front wall of a house adjacent to the carport structure. So that sounds like something that might have been, yeah, the 10 feet in there. It was already in the code that was amended back in 2020 that came to city council. And so all we did was say front wall of the house adjacent to the carport structure to identify the specific carport structure. And that we were saying front wall of the house in case there was any additional clarification needed. And if I recall correctly, the intent of that being added into the code at that time was to keep a carport structure out of public view where it's tucked back behind the house instead of
Right.
equal to the house where it's, you know, when you're looking at the house, bam, right there. And so we were okay with letting it go more into the rear yard to keep the aesthetics of the neighborhood.
Is this us or the California Building Code?
This is not, behind the front wall of the house is not a building code requirement.
Okay.
It was something that was added either by the planning commission or staff back in 2020 and was approved.
What was the code on that one before? I mean, I just want to make sure that if we have people who have it less than 10 feet, assuming they got it permitted, are they protected?
Prior to that, I wouldn't be able to recall. We were addressing it as accessory structures at that time before we had sections of the code. And so it would have been whatever the accessory structure regulation is, which I believe at that time was accessory structure meeting the setback requirements of the primary dwelling, if I recall correctly. And so if it was permitted, any temporary or any carport structure that has a building permit on it now that was approved and met the building code requirements and the planning requirements at the time that it was permitted has a permit on file, and so that these future changes wouldn't affect it.
Okay.
Does the property in question on Genevieve, the structure they built, is that still allowed?
That structure, it is my understanding, was approved, but does not meet the California Building Code requirements.
So do they have to do anything, or are they good to go? Keep it the way it is? Or was the city going to do anything to them?
And so we haven't gotten there yet because we hadn't adopted these structures, and so, Ann, would you be able to fill us in on options on that?
Is this the one that was put on hold until these amendments?
No, the one on Genevieve was the one that was approved back in October that had 0 setback requirements for side, rear, everything, and so it was approved, but not in accordance with the California Building Code at the time.
Oh, right. So so the situation with that, if it does not meet building code, which it doesn't, then if there was a complaint, that person would need to bring it into compliance with building code, either by adding a firewall or whatever. The building official would need to work with that person to tell him or her what needs to be done. So, yes, it has to comply with building code.
So they went to planning commission with it. It was not approved. They brought it to the council. It was overturned.
Yeah.
And we approved it.
Right. Yeah, right. So here, and this, I take take the blame for part of this because I didn't know at the time that this was in violation of the building code. I mean, you can do what you want with a variance, but a variance cannot override the building code. They're two separate things. There's the planning and zoning code, which can, vary from city to city and mostly addresses aesthetics. But then there's the state California building code, which applies to all cities and cannot be changed or waived by the city council or the planning commission. So when the city council approved that variance, that was all fine and well, but that did not waive the building code requirement.
Who enforces the building code?
Safety
The city?
requirements.
So now it's on the city to go and tell all these people that they need to change their structures?
No, the city, it's a complaint-driven system, as Mr. Alves has pointed out. Complaint-driven.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think staffing-wise, that'd be a nightmare.
It is a nightmare, the whole thing's a nightmare.
No, there's no requirement that the city send out, inspectors or anything. It's just on a case-by-case basis. If a neighbor were to complain, then it would need to be corrected.
So I guess what part of the Geneva, if I'm looking at the picture correctly, we're not worried about the 10-foot setback because that's not building code.
Property line.
So we have and in here we have something that says if there are no sidewalls, if it's 0 to less than 5, if it's fire rated, what is our definition of fire rated? Because nobody said anything about that in the fire rating that I saw in anything that I was reading. A metal structure, if it's all metal, it's not going to burn.
And
So how is that
would be-
not within the
That would be our
code?
building official. The fire rated is a requirement of the building code. So Mike, if you can clarify.
It's an all-metal
fire
structure,
rated.
so I'm trying to figure out what is flammable here for this specific situation here.
There are assemblies that have been tested with the building code. There's different firewall assemblies as well as I think the US Gypsum Board has a publication that defines what a 1-hour firewall is, how it's constructed. And yes, even though it is metal, it doesn't meet those requirements.
So how would they retrofit that? Would they just slap up the gypsum board on it on the inside?
Frame a wall.
You'd have to build some form of wall, either out of metal studs or wood studs. That follows that approved assembly with drywall, more than likely fire rated on each side, or different, stucco. There's different types. There's a bunch of different ways you can tackle that.
Are we ready to open this up to the public, or we did that?
Did that.
Okay, so we're at it goes to the next reading?
Yeah.
It moves on to the next reading?
We have to accept it first. I
So you
believe.
would, close the public hearing, and if there's any further comment, and then provide a motion adopting and waiving the first reading of the
We
ordinance.
are closing the public hearing. We've
The
had,
introduction of the ordinance. It's introduce and waive the first reading. You're not adopting it yet. That would happen at the next meeting.
do we have a motion?
Yes. Around this room, we're going, well, if somebody's gonna say something, it's gonna be something from this room at this point.
I'll make a motion if you'd like.
Yeah, why
We
not?
can. That's
Oh,
no
no,
problem.
I've got one ready to go if you want. I just want, no,
I just want to say that I want to thank the planning commission and the other city departments that worked diligently on this. It's quite a hornet's nest, and I honestly think that they did a pretty good job of trying to find as many ways to accommodate as many people as possible. We're not going to make everybody happy here, but at the end of the day, we also consider that not every property within this city is designed or meant to have RV storage, number one, or number two, a structure to store that under, and that's just the way it is. We have to accept that. We are in the city limits of a town. If you want more space, move in the country. There is a limit to what we can and can't do within the confines of our city. So I think they did a pretty good job of trying to accommodate as much as they could. There are some that are not in compliant, and we're gonna have to deal with that as a complaint-driven system. So I'd make a motion to move it to the next stage as written without any changes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
No?
Nay.
So we've got a 2 and 2, and
You'd have a 3 and 2 if the other guy was here.
You have a 2 and 2?
yeah, 2 yes and 2 no.
So what is the changes to the code that you guys would like to recommend?
Motion doesn't pass.
You accept the ones that are in place already.
Okay, so
Correct.
motion failed.
So make a motion.
I'd move, we grandfather what's here now. If you're gonna change all the rules and all of a sudden these things are gonna be, and you're not gonna let us know who is ratting everyone out, then I would recommend we grandfather what's there, and from this point on, then you can have it your way.
So going back to the question, the motion failed, so there is nothing to move forward with. The current code stays into effect unless it goes back onto agenda in the future for it to be revisited at some point. But at this point, it fails, and
So the existing ordinance is not as flexible, the existing ordinance is more restrictive than the
Yeah.
proposed ordinance. Do
There
you
are,
understand that?
It doesn't matter, because it's gonna be the same either way.
Well, that's not the reason I voted no. The reason I voted no is because I don't have another motion to make right now for what changes I'd like to see in it. But I voted no because I'm not in favor of imposing even these lesser restrictive conditions upon homeowners that want to build a carport on the side of their house. And that's the reason I voted no.
Yeah, me too.
So the California Building Code would still apply, so that would still be an
Yeah,
issue.
it doesn't really matter.
That was never on a
in
vote
terms of-
anyways.
Those carport structures still have to comply with the building code, no
Okay,
matter
so
what you do with
let
it.
me make a general statement here. The state requires us to do certain things. I do not agree with the state on those things, and my job as a locally elected official is to do what I can to promote the welfare and the well-being of the citizens to do what they want with their private property, whether or not that goes against what the state mandates. That's my job up here. I'm not just up here as a pawn to be moved around on a chessboard being like, well, the state said it, so we have to do it. We're facing that right now with greater issues. Are we going to comply or not going to comply? And on this, I'm not going to comply. So that's where my position is.
All right, so anyway, it fails. What's next? Are we done now?
So the current ordinance would stay in effect, correct?
Yes, I might suggest that you put this on the next agenda when you have a full council.
You're gonna get another no vote.
We don't know that, so let's not just make assumptions here.
All right, Dave, to appease you, we won't. Here we go. Let's move it on to the next agenda. How's that?
That would be fine.
Yeah.
Do we need a vote for
What the
that?
planning commission worked really hard to do is
Do you need a vote for
is
the,
to be to bring the code as close as possible to the California building.
do you need a vote for this to move it back onto the next agenda?
We need a vote.
Yeah, actually, you should, if I would suggest, since it's a public hearing, to make a motion to continue the public hearing to the next council date.
Very
So you
good.
don't have to re-notice it.
All righty.
I'll make a motion that we continue the public hearing to the next council date.
Very good.
Second it.
We have a motion second. Those in favor of continuing it? Aye.
Aye.
There it is,
Aye.
4-0.
4-0, continue.
All right, now we're down to the nitty gritty. Let's see here. All right, that was council communication, Councilman Crumage.
Thank you, Mayor Alves. I'd like to congratulate the two officers that got the commendations. I know Officer Sharp and Officer Halverson. I know that, I know them a little bit, not as well as I'd like, but I do know from the conversations I've had with them, that they care deeply about their profession, about conducting themselves in a way that would represent the city in a good light. I know they invest in their health, their mental health, their physical health. They're trying to be great officers out there from what I can see. And I would just, again, appreciate them. And Chief, thanks for making that commendation to them. A lot of this stuff that our law enforcement does goes unnoticed. We don't see it, we don't know it, but we know we go to bed at night and we feel pretty safe in this town, so that's a great thing. Some good discussion tonight. A lot of things moving forward, I think, in this year. Looking forward to finishing out 2022, and that's all I got. Thank you.
All right, Councilman Bellinger, please.
I'd like to echo the sentiments towards our police force and the officers involved with everything they've done. You guys continue to do a bang-up great job for us. Thank you again. Real quick, I didn't ask you earlier. I noticed that we've bought a couple Explorers on the check register, September and December from Hilliard. Do you have any of those vehicles in your possession yet?
Yes.
So we do have vehicles to replace the one that was noted in your report that it died and is going to auction or salvage or whatever. So we're
Yes,
back.
Between that report and that one coming in, there was 2 more cars that passed. One came in, it's sitting over there, we're waiting for the outfitter to have an opening to get it
Okay.
squared away.
So we're still down a couple units for you?
I think we're down 2 at this point.
Okay.
And then we should be pretty much caught up, and anything that falls apart there, we can budget for later.
Okay, awesome. Great to hear. I'll leave it at that.
Pro Tem Swift.
Yeah, I echo Councilmember Crumick and Councilman Bellinger's sentiments. So very, very good work, very good work. You know what's funny is I'm listening to this and we're talking about the carport structures and all that. I'm just thinking, well, I mean, the reason some people park their RVs there is because the RV space, at rental places is at a premium. And then I'm looking over into the audience and I'm going, well, sometimes some of our issues kind of sort of either complement other ones or we shoot ourselves in the foot. And sometimes it pays to take a look back and look at the big picture. What we're doing here, does it benefit or hurt what we want to do over here, and vice versa. So this might have been one of those inflection points. And what I mentioned about continuing something into the council communications was, I know this issue regarding anonymous tips has come up again and again and again and again and again. And I think that it would be really, really nice to at least have some chapter and verse, either from the state code or something like that, either ensuring their protection or not. Because we keep going back and forth, can you do this, can you not do that? And I'd like to see if maybe there would be a possible council consensus, as Ann had suggested, to get such a written opinion in our mailboxes. If anybody
We would
wants.
be happy to do that, and I think it's a good idea.
I mean, whether it's a go or not, what kind of leeway there is there no leeway? What are the ins and outs of that under the law? We okay with that?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Well, let's pick the attorney.
Okay, so I hear that there's a consensus.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And this is a starting point because I respect the mayor's point about.
And I would like to have a list of attorneys to choose from, not just one that you guys come up with.
Well, I think
you
the
mean
point
other law firms?
Yes.
I don't know about that.
Well, why would I go back to the well for the same drink of water? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You guys have your opinion, I've heard it. I want a different opinion or another person to give me an opinion. I'm not going to get a different opinion from the law firm that you belong to.
Well, my hope is that, or what I'm wondering about, is this opinion or is this settled chapter and verse law? And that's what I'm asking for.
I can get
There's
the
something
attorney.
written.
I can go get the attorney and get an opinion from another attorney. That's not a problem.
Okay. And that's all I have.
All right, very good. The complexity of what we discuss up here, sometimes people don't get it. I mean, we come from different positions. Each one of us have our own opinion, but it's my opinion, and I agree with Peter on this particular item, that the state of California, like any government, has asked us to perform duties based on what they think's best for us. I don't agree with the state of California on a lot of things that they do. Mandates that they put down our throat with no funding, and they subject that funding to us, is garbage. I'm sick of it. And when we have a public don't stand up, when we don't stand up, we get more of the same. We as a public need to say enough is enough. This community should not have to endure all of this mandates we're getting hit with. We don't have the financial wherewithal. And you know what happens later on? Is because we don't, we have to grow more and more to cover those costs. And then little towns like Escalon disappear, like Manteca, like Ceres, like all the little towns, Turlock. That's what happens. So as long as I'm involved, I'm going to object. And I'm glad that Mr. Crummage has taken that position. And I believe we need to examine more of this stuff. We need to push back a little bit more. Not to become anarchy or unreasonable people, but people to question what's going on. Because this is insanity. What we allow to happen to us is insanity. We're running ourselves into a mess. We can't even afford to pay PERS in the state of California. We have so many debts in the state of California, we are continuing burying ourselves. I think we need to take a harder look at what comes down from the state and start to question it more and push back more. We're not going to get that pushback from staff. We're going to have to do it ourselves. Something we have to keep in mind as citizens of this town. Otherwise, we're going to lose this little town. It's going to be gone. All right, I've said all I have to say. We're going to adjourn to a closed session. Thank everyone for coming this evening, and keep what I said in mind.